Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of Shockwaves. I'm your host, Rob Galluzzo. I am sitting here with Mr. Elric Kane.
I'm here for the deep end horror.
See, you got it right this week.
I prepared. I was looking in the mirror, practicing this over and over in my head.
And our third co-host, Rebecca McHenry, will be joining us a little bit later in the show. She's still at the Arizona convention, and Elric is stepping out of town momentarily.
Yeah.
But this is how devoted he is. He's like, before I leave the country.
I have a 19-hour flight ahead of me for a family emergency, but I was like, I saw a lot of good stuff this week.
I need to tell people what I saw.
I need to share with the universe.
So we thought you guys would appreciate that Elric chimed in at the beginning of the show, and then we'll carry on as usual. But yeah, let's jump right in, man. What did you see?
So I continued with the. I think actually the last time I discussed one of the films from the Arrow box set where they did the American Horror Project that they were doing. It was the Malatesta's Carnival of Blood, and it might have been back when we did our old show. I was not a fan, but I really loved how it was presented, and they did a great job putting it together. It was a movie that just didn't gel with me. It was a little silly, and there's the tone of it, but it has its fans. A lot of people really love that one. So number 2 from this box set that we finally caught up with, there's 3 in there, is one I've wanted to see for years. It has one of the best posters in the history of cinema, also one of the most misleading posters in the history of cinema. The Witch Who Came from the Sea. This film's largely known for, well, the director did a lot of softcore, and maybe some hardcore. He looks like he did a lot of hardcore. But the thing that it's kind of known for being elevated by is Dean Cundey shot it. Dean Halloween Cundey.
Legend. All the early Carpenter work.
You can also hear a great interview that we did with him on Killer
That's
PV.
That's right, on Killer PV.
Shot
these little movies, Back to the Future and Jurassic Park.
And he's also just one of the coolest, nicest guys, and really fun to talk to. But so this film's really interesting. And it's Millie Perkins is the lead actress, and she was part of that whole Monty Hellman, Jack Nicholson, did the Shooting and Ride the Whirlwind, their first couple of films that Jack Nicholson wrote. She's the star of them. I think she dated Jack for a period during that. I think, in fact, there's a story she was dating Jack at the premiere of this, and he was so appalled by the film that he went and harassed the director about how terrible it was. So to get to the meat of it, what it really is more or less a rape revenge film. But what's funny is it's like an attempt to make an elevated version of an I Spit on Your Grave, because it's Dean Cundey shooting it, so everything's like crazy widescreen, beautiful shots of the beach and the sky, and it's really kind of an unusual film, but it is a better movie because of it. I don't know if it's a better horror movie. It's pretty intense. It has a couple of really grotesque scenes where she's exacting revenge on people. It has very strange dialogue. The dialogue's kind of the most fun thing about this movie. It feels like some of it's improv by really good theater actors who are just saying really out there, bizarre things. It's a really weird film, but it's a fun, elevated exploitation flick, and I think seeing it like this is great. I'm assuming it's going to be the best thing in the box set. I think the last one's called Premonition that I haven't seen yet, and it didn't look great from the trailer.
Right.
So I'm a little underwhelmed by this box set, but I also think it's just beyond cool that they did it. Here's Arrow Films for keep doing it. So anyway, I think this one will be fun. But what I will say about Millie Perkins' performance is, I think it's actually one of the great genre performances. It's like a really, really interesting woman coming undone, mentally coming undone, and there's incest themes and all sorts of crazy stuff in there. So I think this one could have some good essays written about it. Like feminist theories, and it's an interesting film.
Okay.
That's one of them. I saw a lot of stuff. Okay, inspired from Mike Flanagan. Before we get to our little date night,
we saw a few
had a
of
good
them,
day.
I got a Mike Flanagan inspired one, and you have one.
Yeah,
too,
so let's do our Flanagan. Okay, so let's just start by saying our last episode was absolutely kick-ass.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite guests.
It was a really fascinating conversation. Really, for me, it enriched his films. I wanted to go back and rewatch things.
Yes, me
after
too.
Talking. So that's
a lot
a great
of people
sign.
did. And by the way, when I say one of my favorites are, for those of you that are new to the show, thinking but you've only done 4 episodes.
Yeah.
We also have 140 episodes of Killer
interviews
POV as well.
with great people.
But he was great and a lot of fun. And quite frankly, I think Dreamcatcher Day is going to catch on.
Dreamcatcher Day, I'm all
a new
in.
thing.
I'm going to watch. Me and you are watching that. We're going to do a
fine.
commentary with him. So inspired by this great man, I watched Ouija.
Oh, I see.
Yes, not Witchboard 1 or 2. I watched Ouija.
For his Ouija
okay,
movie.
everyone hates this movie. This movie's meant to be terrible. Is it terrible? I don't think it's terrible. Here's what I think. It's very well made. It's very slick. It's a nice-looking movie. There's
Do you know who directed it?
Yeah, it was Styles White or something. It was a name I don't really recognize. Its problem is this. It has one major problem. It fails to capitalize on its gimmick, which is a board game. Okay, so it opens with this early on in the film. I actually really enjoyed the first 20 minutes of it. Kind of the setup to the movie I enjoyed. In the halfway part of this film, it's very, spoilers, I guess. You're never going to watch it. But it becomes basically Insidious 2 in the middle, and its backstory to the ghost they're actually talking to is almost exactly, even looks like the things from Insidious 2, the key characters from Insidious 2, the bad people. It's so similar that you're like, but nowhere near as good, that you're like, oh. And then they forget about the Ouija board for 80% of the remainder of the film. The Ouija board's hardly mentioned, hardly used as the contact point. So it's more so it feels like a watered-down version of an Insidious sequel at that point, which I think is a shame, because I feel like it actually was doing something kind of fun with the board game, and I don't know what the piece of the board game is that you're actually moving around.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it has an actual name. This is when we need Bekah's weird knowledge.
Yeah, the weird piece with the...
a piece of glass, right?
Thing.
The cool thing about that is early on, this is something I never knew about Ouija boards, and it might be in other movies, is that if you hold up the glass part and look through it, you would be able to see the other world.
Oh,
and so that's cool. A great gimmick, and I think they use it one time. They talk about it a bunch, one good scare gag, and I'm like, dude, that is the whole movie. I'm sorry, you go into the further type thing and you hold that up, and also maybe it could have been a good point to connect those universes. Insidious and Ouija could have merged at some point. So it was actually kind of watchable. I got to say, not saying guilty pleasure because I definitely didn't like it. It's slick design, but it's totally forgettable. But it does make me excited about a sequel if he capitalizes on that and finds better characters. These characters are your generics, stock teen characters, except the actress from
Bates Motel.
Bates Motel is really good.
Olivia Cooke.
I always like watching her.
I loved her, yeah.
And the kid from Big Love was good. He's all grown up. And most importantly, there's a scene with a guidance counselor in this movie that is breathtaking. Morgan Peter Brown is in the scene. You will never forget him. His voice alone. I was watching it, and I kind of chuckled to myself. Morgan's been on the earlier show.
Morgan's a friend of ours.
But I also loved it because I was like, oh, wow, it's like you're born to play that kind of character. It was perfect typecasting, and he did a good job. So congrats, Morgan.
I want to see that now.
But, it's dumb fun, and it's playing on HBO right now. It's every couple weeks they're playing it. And
well, everything you just said, Mike's take on the second one is just much more encouraging, and adult characters. Set in whatever it was, the 70s? Time period. So I'm looking forward to it.
No, and just look, he could do anything, and I know he'd at least put more attention into the details, right? That's the thing about a good, a good director. I'm not saying the guy who did the first isn't good. It could just all be that script.
Yeah.
But it's not a great film. And what was the one?
Well, he had spoke about how on Netflix he had just seen a movie called They Look Like People.
Mm-hmm.
I was flipping through, and I saw it was on there, and I checked it out. It's a pretty short movie. It's 80 minutes long, so it's not much of a commitment. But the most impressive thing about it is a super, super low budget movie. And these are the sort of things, when you see something like this or The Battery, I kept thinking of The Battery a lot, even though they're not at all alike.
And Resolution a little.
Resolution.
Because of the two friends.
I love that stylistically, it was the way it was edited and put together, which really proves that you don't really need a lot of money, just a strong story, or at least a strong vision for how to tell the story. And I just remember thinking visually it was really cool. Essentially about these two best friends, and one's a little off. He had just broken up with his girlfriend, and he comes and pretty much stays with his best friend, who is trying to he's doing all this positive thinking stuff. He's trying to ask his boss out from work, all this stuff, and then this friend kind of comes out of nowhere. And we all have a friend like that, I think, that's a little bit disruptive, and you remember why you stopped hanging out with them.
That's a good point.
But he's having a lot of visions because he's convinced that, almost bordering on the They Live concept, where there's aliens around, or there's something around us, whether they're creatures or aliens. I wasn't sure. I think they were vague about it.
Yeah, and there's these shots early in the movie before you see any monsters or anything. There's a shot where he's just looking at a girl in bed, and it's really dark, and you can't see it, and nothing really weird happens, but the music makes you feel so it's probably actually my favorite moment in a movie this year is those little moments where he's just looking at a girl in the dark and it makes you feel uneasy and you don't know what it is.
Well, also because we've all, for the most part, we've all been in that situation where you're sleeping with another person in bed and it's dark and so like playing on the like that's always the fun thing with horror is if you can tap into something that we can all relate to. You know, when somebody cuts himself with a knife, you know it because you've always accidentally hit your pricked your finger with a knife or whatever. But I thought it was really interesting, and it had me the whole time, just like the way the relationships played out, and the kind of, is it horror? Is it not? Is this guy real? Is it legit? Is this guy just imagining it?
Yeah.
I like that kind of psychological stuff.
And I especially like it when they also give you payoff throughout the movie. So it's different. If you give me no payoff and it gets to the end of the movie, it's like, was it in his head or is it real? And you don't give me anything, that's different. But if you give me a couple scenes throughout where I see something really unique and and there's a couple moments in this movie that you see something really like, oh God, like that is terrifying, you know. And that's how you have to sell a movie to me. It's like you
I also liked they were good actors. Fresh faces that I didn't know at all, and they were all really really good. Like I really liked that lead guy. He looked reminiscent to a lot of kind of other somewhat famous movie stars. But I really liked it a lot. And I totally, it's on Netflix Instant, so I totally recommend it if you want to see something really different and weird.
Cool. Yeah, I really liked it. I think I talked about it on our first episode of this new show.
Yeah.
And it's it's little, so you have to look at it in the way it's put together. But that is its advantage too, because you don't think about it. It could have been shot on a phone. You wouldn't have cared. You're sticking with the character, like you say.
Yeah,
that was a good one. I saw, I read about a film that was on demand. So I paid for it. I'd never heard of it, and it's new and is getting these great reviews from like British papers called The Ones Below. And the director is David Farr, and he was a screenwriter of that thriller Hannah a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
About the girl, which I really liked, and also wrote the show that's on right now called The Night Manager with Tom Hiddleston. It's on AMC, and it's like a 6-part big miniseries. So I was like, oh, I'm curious what this is, and then every description about it kept comparing him to like a debut of a Polanski, and I was like, oh,
that's
cool.
up your alley, yeah.
So it's basically a couple who are expecting a child. They're pretty far along. They live at the top of a little apartment building where there's a vacant room downstairs, and the vacant space was obviously an older person who had just died. And so they're kind of like worrying, I wonder who's going to move in below us in this tight like British apartment. And then who moves in, unfortunately, is the governor. You don't want the governor from Walking Dead moving in.
David Morrissey?
David Morrissey and his
I've seen this
beautiful
trailer.
Yeah,
I know
beautiful blonde, like one of the most attractive looking woman I've ever seen, just has that. She looks Nordic goddess. They move in downstairs, but my only problem with this movie is like very much like The Shining, David Morrissey is full governor from frame one. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the kind of movie where I'm meant to like slowly, he's meant to be nice to me, he takes me out, and then he fucks me over. In this movie, he's like kind of crazy.
Right off the bat.
He's like, he holds it back too, but he also like will yell at you, and you're like, we're not friends anymore. But anyway, so you go with it. They move in downstairs. They're also pregnant in a very early event in the film, so I don't feel like it's a spoiler, but don't listen from this moment if you want to wait for a second. They lose it in some act that is kind of connected to the people upstairs. And then the rest of the movie is this menacing kind of thing of, it's going to be like Inside, like we're going to take over your life, and we're going to try to take. And so it's kind of weird because the girl is so nice, it's hard to believe she'd be in on it. Biggest problem with this movie is the plausibility factor. And I'm usually all in for movies where I'll go, I'll just show me anything, it's fine. I was questioning this throughout the movie where it just didn't feel real enough with the people downstairs' motivations and how they're pulling it off. But the lead couple who are upstairs are really interesting because the lead actress, the character also suffers like manic depression. And so you don't even know if she wants to keep her child because she's a little scared because her mother's relationship was bad. So it has got psychological layers, and I did like it. I thought it was, really kind of it kind of reminded me of The Gift. But it's not as good a film as The Gift.
Right. Okay.
And I'm calling it dark, twisted pregnancy horror. It's Inside by way of Hitchcock. Because it's made like a Hitchcock film. It's all slick, it's all clean, it's not dark and dingy at all. But it's got that kind of story. It was pretty good. I think some people like it. If you're into that whole, if you watch all those kind of weird dark pregnancy things like Bekah did.
Yeah.
Perfect for if you're expecting.
Right.
And then we had our date night. Korean date night
with Andrew Cash, our friend Andrew. So it was a triple date.
Well, there's also another person there, your roommate.
Oh yeah, I'm Dave Foy.
Let's not leave him out.
Well, no, we've been hearing a lot about this Korean film called The Wailing. It's got tremendously good reviews. It comes from the director of 2 films, The Chaser and The Yellow Sea. The Yellow Sea is like one of my favorite Korean films of the last decade. It is
That's
just
what Phil said, too.
powerful. Phil Blankenship.
Yeah.
Phil's the one who recommended The Yellow Sea to me, and it's so great.
I love The Chaser. I saw that and loved it. I haven't seen the Yellow Sea.
Yes, I mean, he's like one of the... I should look up his name.
Hong Jin-na.
You
I just wrote it down.
He's one of the stronger Korean filmmakers out there doing... Yeah. And, you know, I can't peg any of these 3 movies as quote-unquote horror. It's just kind of like this weird hybrid of action thriller that just happens to have horrific stuff in it.
And this one has the closest where you can actually call horror because of some of the storylines have horror trope, like a possession movie.
Stuff and, exorcism and all that kind of stuff. So this was the new one. But we, here in Los Angeles, we're very lucky that we have a theater called the, is it the CVG?
CGV,
CGV Theater in Koreatown that shows Korean movies, like modern Korean movies play there. I've been there a bunch of times. My friends had never been there, so it was a new experience for them. But it's
Korean
fun.
Lunch,
a Korean lunch right in the little shopping center. So they show one major Korean movie, usually 1 or 2, and then they'll be like, I think they had the X-Men movie with Korean subtitles.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like it's all in. It's really fun.
And it's a nice theater. And the thing about this movie that was so cool is this movie, like a week and a half before, had just premiered at Cannes in competition. So it's like this movie, like you don't hear anything, and no one's talking about it. And then, our friends tell us, this film's playing at this little Korean theater, and it was just at Cannes, and you can see it now, which was super cool, I thought.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I know people have been asking me. We were recommended by our friends Phil and Jackie to go see it at the CGV cinemas, but I think it just got a slightly wider release.
Well, it was 20th Century Fox, so at the start it had 20th Century logo. I remember big, so I thought maybe it'll come out.
Right, so if I were you and you want to check it out, I'd look kind of at your local listings if there's any theaters that kind of show like things like this or the Green Room, like the independent stuff. It might actually be playing near you right now, so check that out. But what did you think? Because this was an epically long...
You know what? I had a really interesting experience with this film. The first... Okay, so one of my favorite South Korean films, and I'm not an expert with South Korean cinema like you are, but I watch usually anything that's like meant to be good. I'll see it.
Yeah.
Memories of Murder was recommended to me about like 8 years ago by a film
movie.
store guy, a guy who was in a video store, and he's like, "This is one of the best films I've seen in years," and I watched and loved it.
Yeah,
and I like Mother as well.
Zodiac.
Yeah, it's just such a good movie.
Yeah.
And so we were hearing comparisons between this and The Exorcist, and I would tweak that. I'd say it's The Memories of Murder, Exorcist 3, and a little bit of Kathy's Curse. Just a little bit to keep you on your toes. I got to say, the first 40 minutes is more like comedy, where they're these films are so hard to classify. Like the way they play with tone in a way that is so effortless to them, but you're like, no American director could ever make that leap.
Exactly.
The first half's funny, and the setup of the characters is endearing and sweet. And I found myself a little tired at the start, so I was kind of I was in it, but I was a little drifty, but I was still enjoying it. And then in the middle part, it gets kind of, gets a little weirder. And then the last hour or whatever is probably the most intense, besides Green Room, the most intense experience I've had in a movie. It has a possession, and it has an exorcism sequence cross-cut between these two different storylines that had me on the fucking edge of my seat. I was like, this is the best scene I've seen
this year. It's pretty intense, yeah.
And then as it goes towards the end of the movie, it really won me over as a movie. And when this thing ended, I know everyone was I think we're all a little shell-shocked in what you watched, but a couple days after this will definitely be in my top couple movies a year, because I feel like but here's the problem. Here's the rub with this movie. I don't think this movie is going to play anywhere near the same way if you watch this at home.
Yeah.
Because it's long, and it's got a lot of different tones, unless you're already a big South Korean film fan. But based on, I thought I was just weird in that moment. Why am I loving this movie? But then looking online, the reviews of this, all these people really were into it. So far.
I'm kind of mixed on it. Because it is, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's a long movie.
It's long.
And again, that's part of my problem with when these Korean directors do American movies, Chan-wook Park doing Stoker. Yes, it's a beautifully crafted movie, but the Korean cinema, it combines all these elements and tones that I just don't think translate to American movies at all. You can't get away with the humor and the seriousness of something like this. Basically, there's a series of, I guess it's murders, but it's so bizarre in this town. Essentially, one member of this family will go absolutely nuts and kill their whole family, and then end up kind of comatose or with
eyes
welts.
are welts and eyes rolled back in their head, and
it's this very perplexing what the hell is going on? And there's multiple cases of this happening, and then the main detective or the main police officer in it, who's not even a good police
No,
officer.
he's like a goofy,
That's the funny part.
overweight. It's very strange.
Very goofy. I think he's having an affair on his wife, if I remember correctly. His young little daughter starts to show signs of what these other cases were. So then it kind of becomes almost like an exorcism. Like, what's wrong with the girl? And then just the difference is, like, I can't imagine an American version of the shaman. Like
no,
they call a shaman in to
there's so many cultural things that are. But I think that's why why I liked it so much is I am so of all the tropes we talked about occasionally, like which tropes we're sick of most. I'm most sick of the exorcism movies because I'm also sick of seeing Catholicism on screen and like going like dwindling numbers of Catholics in this world. Why are we still buying into these movies every time made for the masses of some priest coming in and getting rid of spirit in a religious way? So this was so different. It felt more like a battle of the black magics between different types of shamans and stuff, and the build-up's so weird. There is a lot we will all miss watching this, and like the cultural thing. I remember Andrew Cash coming out afterwards, and he was just like, "Oh my god, there are like so many cultural references in there that there's no way we'll get." But I loved being overpowered by the movie, and not having it and not needing to know. It was one of my favorite experiences, like because I wouldn't have said that in the first hour. I think I was just a little half in, but by the time the whole thing came together, I was like, "Whoa!" And it really pays off. There's some payoff with the last stuff with physical transformations of characters and monsters, and you're like, "Whoa! All right, cool, I'm in."
Plus, it was it was really. I'm glad we saw it on the big screen. It was gorgeously shot.
Yeah,
like,
really nice.
Every couple of minutes, there'd be this great giant wide shot of just the city.
Yeah,
and you're like, man, I don't know. There's something about foreign films that appeal to me in that sense. Is that I know nothing about this world.
Yeah,
and it's always a little easier to get wrapped up or scared by like foreign films because of that. Because you're like, well, even if I was in this situation, I don't know what I'd do because I'm not familiar with these surroundings at all.
Yeah, you're out of your element, which is kind of nice. No, it's I think it's one I bet you'll feel differently if you ever see it again, right? It's like
I mean, it's
a lot to take in the first one.
It was very dense, and it's funny because my roommate and I were talking about it afterwards, and there's so many. I think it's the type of movie that's so layered because he was like, "Did you catch that it maybe underliningly was about this?" And I'm like, "No, not at all."
Yeah.
He's like, "But that's." I get that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it is one that would
also,
probably
I don't
benefit.
think he was having an affair, but I think what it was funny, and this is why it wouldn't be in an American movie, I think the idea, and as a married person, maybe I get this part more, I think the idea was that he had to sneak into his car to have sex with his own wife.
Oh.
And that their kid comes out and like sees them, and then they have this conversation, hey, how long were you watching? I mean, it's so, but done in a funny, cute way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But like it probably appears because, the way it's put together, like you're having an affair, but it's with your own wife.
Right.
I think it was just to show how kind of sad, pathetic their
life
existence
was.
is.
Yeah.
And also though how communal they live, right? You live with your mom in the same room of your little house that doesn't have real doors. I mean, it's anyway. I thought it was a really cool film, and really glad we did that trip.
Yeah.
Then another fun thing happened a couple of nights ago, which we won't talk too much about, just only because you guys aren't going to get to see it for a little while, and that's always a little painful. But Beyond the Gates by a good friend of ours, Jackson Stewart. He wrote it, the whole thing. I remember he wrote it Jump Cut
with Steven Scarlatta.
Yeah, Steven Scarlatta. I know the idea came from Steven Scarlatta. They tell a fun story at the Q&A about how they were sitting down to meet for the first time, and they're both into very obscure films, which we can really identify with. And they're just throwing around different ideas for things that they want to do. And Steven said, I really always wanted to make a movie about those VHS board games where you'd watch the VHS and it would correspond to the board game, and where people get stuck in the game or something like that. And Jackson just said, and he thought it was like one of his throwaway ideas that the guy would roll his eyes, and Jackson's like, we're making it. That's the movie. And so I guess this is what they said at the Q&A. And they sat down and wrote it, and Barbara Crampton's the actual entity that's on the VHS from Reanimator.
Yeah.
I'd read the script but hadn't seen any of the test screenings. Didn't go to any tests, but I'd read the script early, was going to help him make it at one point, and I remember reading it going, I thought it was going to be really hard to pull off some of the stuff that I know the budget's very low, and I was like, I just don't know if you'll ever be able to get that as good as you want it. But they did. The parts that I was most like, I wonder if you'll be able to pull that off. They're the best parts in the movie. I mean, he pulled those things off. I really liked it. I really hit all my nostalgia buttons. There's some limitations because of budget and setup, and you can always deepen. The one thing I was like, you can always deepen emotional connections, but when I'm watching this, there are so many little payoffs of gore scenes or because you're dealing with it has a total Phantasm vibe. That homemade feel that Phantasm had in the other worlds. I feel like you can see that influence on the movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it makes me kind of excited because I think this is a film, when Rewind This and all those documentaries on VHS were coming out, I feel like this movie just taps direct. This is the narrative version of that. The kind of thing those people all want to watch.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think it's like the epitome of. I agree with everything you said. I mean, the cast is fantastic. I mean, obviously Barbara's in it for a little bit, but you have Graham Skipper, who's an almost human in the mind's eye. Joe Begos' movies,
and in this one, cast very much against his normal type.
Sure,
Bria
Grant is his girlfriend. I thought she was terrific in it. Chase Williamson, who was in John Dies at the end, he continues to be great.
This is career. Well, I actually think this is up their career best. Like for him, that was the nice. Actually, my favorite thing about the film was seeing, because he's an actor who he hit it out of the park first time, which is tough to do. Your first role, and John Dies at the end, he just owns it. And then we even worked on a short with him with Bekah, and I haven't really seen him in anything where I'm like, oh, they've used you well.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the first time, a little bit in The Guest, but he's a little bit of a cliche, you know?
Yeah.
He totally nails it. Every scene he's in, I'm like, oh, you got it. The jokes, the turns.
Yeah.
Really nice to see them kind of, and they work well together, him and Graham. And kudos to Graham, because he really is against type. Like, to me, that's the total opposite of how I think of him.
Right, yeah, me too.
He's all buttoned up and square. But I think this film, the actual use of, and I never played these board games. This is, when I heard about the script, I had never really heard of that.
It's very obscure, yeah.
Had you ever seen them?
I'd seen them, but I'd never played one of these games. You know, you'd rent a VHS with a board game, and it'd be like an interactive game sort of deal. It was a very small market for it.
Yeah, and it's called Midnight. I know one of them was called like Midnight that some people play.
And that's what I love about this movie is because here's the thing. When you do get to see it, you'll really stick with it, because I thought there was, you know, and I've told Jack this, I thought it's a little slow in the first half getting to know all the characters. And then once one of the gore gags happens, you're like, oh, I see where this is going. And that's a fun reveal. I think it's quirky and perfectly, you said Phantasm. I didn't think that initially. It just perfectly fits that sort of weirdo movie you would find on the store shelf in the 80s on video. You know what? Almost like an Empire Full Moon sort of deal.
Totally.
It feels exactly like one of those old school movies, but done now.
And best of all, and this is something I really respond to well, and something I aspire to myself as somebody who wants to make film, is it's perfectly him. Like, it's, you know, if you make a film that really genuinely reflects who you were and what your interests are, you can't lose. This movie's Jackson and Steven. I see both of them in this movie,
much,
which makes me know it's going to connect to people. It's not like when you're trying to do something like, oh, I'm going to make a slasher because that's hot right now.
Right.
You know, no, I really dug it, and congrats to you, Jackson, if you're listening. And also some fun Fulci gags in there, and you can see the influence of The Beyond and Cemetery Gates.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some news about an official release, because now it's just debuting at festivals.
Yeah. And we told Jackson we'd have him on once that's closer. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Get both of them on together would be a lot of fun. And then it's something fun. So today I have to leave the country, and I'm bummed because I had never seen Night Flyer.
Yeah.
I'd seen the one image from it that's pretty typically circulated with the mouth opening of the vampire character, and I was curious, but I also had kind of been burned by some of that period of King adaptations. Like, I think, is it Tommy? What's the other one with Langoliers?
Langoliers.
There's just a couple that and I haven't seen these in years, so it's not like to pick them out. But there's some of them that have that aesthetic, TV movie-ish feel. There was a few in a row, and it kind of it dampened my spirits. Anyway, it took us a lot to get a copy of Night Flyer. It's very not easy at all.
It's out of print now.
The good news is it's a great copy. It's like I was thinking it was going to be like a kind of bad DVD. It's actually looks like as good as you could find. So,
yes.
So thanks to whoever gave that to us. This film really kind of surprised me and kind of blew my mind, I got to say, and that's why it's a bummer I'm not going to be here for the interview part for me personally. So I wanted to make sure I could come here and tell you what I thought of the movie.
Yeah.
This is it's a movie on an aesthetic level. The first 80% of it, as a little flat, liken it to those other movies where it has that feeling of the 90s and HBO and that kind of look. So, of course, when I looked up later and found out it's because it's actually an HBO film, I'm like, oh, well, at least that makes sense. But that's not to say the content isn't really interesting. The way the story's taking place, and there's some really good, murder sequences. You've got this serial killer, in quote marks.
Well, yeah, this is a Stephen King story where there's a guy flying around from airport to airport.
At night. Dark.
He's the night flyer.
He has curtains on his plane.
I love that. And he may be a vampire.
Yeah, maybe a vampire.
I love the idea of a vampire that flies a plane.
And then the connection, what makes it so fun is the connection is that, so that setup looks like it would be the front page of one of those bad Inquirer stories,
yes.
And then that's exactly the story. It's about a tabloid journalist being forced to take that as the story and make it as exploitive as possible, and it's Miguel Ferrer from RoboCop.
God. And he's so
who's
good.
Just like the worst, if you only judged him by his screen appearances, he's the worst human on earth.
Yes.
He's like the worst James Woods,
He's a terrible human being.
But in real life, I know one of our friends, Matt Curry Holmes, is very close to it and know him very well and always tells us what a great guy is, so I believe that. I love that setup. I'll tell you one thing, man. I was thinking, going, oh, this is like the precursor to freaking Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Totally,
this is like that character. He is that same kind of guy.
In fact, I rewatched it with my roommate Dave, and he brought that movie up.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking double feature. I'm going to recommend this as a double feature with Nightcrawler, so you get the real movie. I think they're very interesting. I think if this was remade now, it would be a paparazzi story. Like, he would be a paparazzi to make it really relevant.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, maybe a celebrity got killed, so you're paparazzi, you're chasing down that.
Sure.
But it has a really good build-up. Some of the scenes remind me a little bit aesthetic of The Resurrected by Dan O'Bannon, which I also only saw this year, where it feels a little generic, like here's a detective searching for someone, those kind of setups. And the worst thing about it is every time somebody tells their story about their interaction, it does that typical, well, I remember, and camera pushes and then they tell a story. But that also could be part of that kind of TV setup. Now, luckily,
I like that because those guys were they're king characters.
Yeah. No,
with the accents and all, you're like, oh, this is totally like, one of them in particular who tells the story, he's Fred Gwynn from like Pet Sematary.
Fred
totally Judd.
No, and I see all that. And I'm sure if I saw it when it came out, I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's just just slightly less cinematic in that way, more TV-ish, but it's still such a fun story, great performance, and I'm like watching this movie going, man, that's really cool. And then you see a couple gore gags where at the actual when you get a little closer to the creature that are really kind of incredible, and I'd kind of never seen anything quite like it. But then this is the thing that got me, okay? And anyone who knows my taste will totally get it if they've seen this movie. I was not prepared for it because I knew nothing about that this was in it. The last 15 minutes or 10 minutes of this movie has a leap that goes total next level, very close to the Beyond mixed with the look of demons, the way the creatures look, where he's basically, forced to taste the blood of a character and sees this whole other world, and he's kind of trapped like hell. Basically, gets a vision of hell that Miguel Ferrer is in, and it is shot so well. I instantly this morning took a photo, tweeted it out. It is just gorgeous. The way they it actually made me go, this might be like my favorite looking part of an American film in a long time, where it's so out there and Fulci and so this is worth somebody putting out on Blu-ray. Hopefully a Scream Factory be listening, because they did, help him make Fender Bender.
Yeah.
They did make Fender Bender with him. It really got me excited that somebody would make a movie with something that out there to end something that looked so different than the other parts. But it enhanced the entire movie. By the end, I was like, oh, wow, this is a really... I'd call it almost a great movie. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of dying to watch it again. It was
weird.
Right. As soon as it ended, I was like, oh, whoa, okay. All right. I gotta take this in again. So if you haven't seen this like me, you had never seen this one, definitely worth berating those Scream Factory guys.
Seeking
hurling abuse.
Seeking it out or waiting for hopefully some sort of re-release. And then, there's I just wanted to mention, by the way, the female lead in it was Julie Entwistle. Yeah, it's her first movie. She was only in one other movie, but she, we were watching it last night, and she is like the heir to Phoebe Cates. She should have been, because at that point Phoebe Cates was kind of out of the, out of films and stuff. Yeah. I'm like, God, she's got that quality to her where she's just so beautiful and reminds me of that kind of character. I was like, man, she could have been like the next Phoebe Cates. Or
well, all I could think about last night was it'd be really cool to see a late sequel made where it's her.
Well, we're going to find out about that because
cool.
Mark co-wrote one with Stephen King. So we'll find out about that later in the show. Well,
I know nothing about it, so that's good. All I'm saying, my idea was wow, it'd be cool, her trying to disprove things and then interacting with the Night Flyer. And the cool thing about a woman and the Night Flyer would be there could be a romantic Dracula kind of vibe if you did that. So I don't know, but you're
going to find out.
The cool thing about this episode is this might be one of the first I ever listen to because I won't be on it, which is great.
That's fun.
And the last thing I'm going to say, it's not a movie. I want to recommend this book to you guys before summer starts, because this could really stock your entire summer viewing and listening. Del Howison, who is the Dark Delicacy owner and the guy to ask about book recommendations. I was there a few months ago, and he said, "Oh, you've got the Book of Lists horror edition, right?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't." And he showed me this book. It's called The Book of Lists. They make lots of different topics for the Book of Lists, but the horror one that he's one of the editors on, and a bunch of other people, and the entire book. I started reading it a year ago, but I just finished it a couple nights ago. Read the last part. It is so cool. The first 2/3 are Eli Roth's top 10 zombie movies, or Stephen King's favorite whatever adaptation, and then the lists get more obscure. That's top 10 scenes from literature from horror, top 10 albums, top 10 scores by just so many different voices in horror that this is the perfect book to own. Like, really, you should own it, and you should like be just flicking through it, and then you'll get all sorts of lists for stuff to do over summer. I've written down like about 10 titles, and especially literature that I want to check out now. So I think it might be a good one to get if you haven't heard of it. Probably like $13 on Amazon.
Cool.
And so that's my little. I'm glad I could make it. I'm bummed I'm gonna miss this interview now.
We are too. Thanks again, Elric. We're glad you could at least chime in for the beginning of the show, and hang tight. And we've got an interview coming up with Mark Pavia.
Sounds good.
Okay, and over the span of that 5-second music cue, Elric has disappeared. He's now in Australia.
He is gone. He's in Australia.
And
vanished.
Bekah has magically reappeared from her trip to Arizona.
Yeah, I made it back from Phoenix that quick. So.
Radio magic, baby. Podcast magic.
Yeah, so it was a hell of a weekend. I can't even call it a weekend because I've been there since Wednesday morning of last week. And I apologize. My voice is a tad bit smokier than usual because I also caught some type of
smoky and
con
sexy
plague, which I always catch. And this time I was even trying to like preempt it, and I was taking Sambucol, which my doctor had actually recommended beforehand, like 1 chew a day you're supposed to take, and it's supposed to keep you from getting sick. Every single time I do a convention, I end up with a cold. It's just crazy.
It's all those germs.
It is. Everybody's there, and everybody's shaking hands, and I want to meet everybody, and you're hugging people, and yeah, it just didn't. And I have problems with hotel rooms in general. Like, I just walk in and assume everybody has been there and they're disgusting people. So
yes, most people are disgusting.
I think so. And but yeah, and then I'm in the hotel room dying. But
this is the Phoenix Comic-Con.
Phoenix Comic-Con.
Okay.
And I started doing this one, I think this was my 4th year or 5th year. And I started doing it just because they had emailed me a couple of years back. This is when I was with Fango, and they were like, we really want to have a horror panel. Would you be up for driving down for it if we gave you a hotel room? And I was like, yeah, it was like a 6-hour drive. At the time, I'd never seen the desert before. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I went down, and I was honestly expecting a pretty small con. This is 4 years ago. And it was huge. And I was shocked by like the scale and the scope of it. And everybody was just wonderful. And so I've done it every year since then. It has now grown exponentially, even from where it was 4 years ago. This year, they had almost 100,000 attendees.
Oh, my God. Wow.
It's massive. It takes over all of downtown, like everything becomes part of the convention. The hotel that I stay in, and I always request the same hotel because they do gaming tournaments in the lobby all night long.
Oh, wow.
I put up a video of it on Blumhouse. So, like, 3 a.m., you go out of your hotel room, and there are like literally hundreds of fans out there playing like Cards Against Humanity and Magic and Dungeons and Dragons. And I mean, that was like a hardcore Dungeons and Dragons game because I was like, I'm going to sit in because I'm a very casual D&D player, and I just think it's kind of fun. And those guys were like
intense, I'm sure.
Oh my God. I was like, I can't do this. This is intense. So instead I played Cards Against Humanity at night.
That's fun.
Which was awesome. We had, I think I was on 6 different panels. Which is a blast. The panels are always like my favorite part. Whether I'm on them or not, just even going to see them is awesome. And so this year we did a panel for Blumhouse.com, which was just Dave and I. And it was great because everybody was really interested in like where we find the weird articles. And I think that might be my new tagline for the site. We find the weird so you don't have to. Because like when I was describing the site, I was like, well, what do we put up? Bunch of weird stuff that like we think is cool, and then because I was talking about the Ring versus the Grudge baseball game.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that clip.
We find the weird stuff so you don't have to. It's like all there.
Cool.
And everybody was really interested in it, and the urban legends. And so one of the biggest takeaways that I have from the weekend is that creepypastas are just emerging as this massive new form of horror. And it's got this huge following. They did one creepypasta panel, which I wasn't on. I just attended because I was so intrigued. And they had over 500 people show up for it. Like, people were standing outside the door to hear the panel.
I don't get this at all.
Yeah, and it was amazing. And then I was suddenly like, yeah, we're covering those on Blumhouse.com. It was awesome. But at the same time, I learned a lot of new creepypastas. I learned a lot about them. And then it got me thinking, and this might be an interesting episode, like, why hasn't Hollywood tapped a lot of these creepypastas? And I came to the conclusion that it's because there's no clear title of ownership.
Yeah,
so
like
if
a rights issue.
Yeah, if you're Warner Brothers and you want to make, like, a movie version of some of these creepypastas, it's like really hard to figure out.
Hasn't that been the issue with Slender Man? For the last couple
Slender Man,
years?
and there's been a couple of Slender Man things that have come out. Like they did a video game called Slender, not Slender Man, and there's that Slender Man documentary. But I'm fairly sure that that's why something huge has not happened. Same thing with like Black Eyed Children or the Russian Sleep Experiment. Some of the really well-known creepypastas. It's impossible to tell who owns these elements because they're being created by an internet thread. So there's like 15 people who are there. And even some of the most well-known creepypastas, Slender Man, like there's a couple of different people who claim ownership of that, said, I created it. So it's really hard to do. But at the same time, it's just this treasure trove of untapped horror stories, which were just fascinating. The panel, I mean, the guy literally just sat up there and told him like campfire tales with some visuals from the actual sites. And it was just fascinating stuff. So, yeah, that was one of my big takeaways from the weekends. Our creepypastas are so much bigger than I ever thought they were. And I already knew they were huge, but they're just even bigger than that. So the panels, we also did one. So we did the Blumhouse.com panel. We did one on the state of horror, which was a blast. I was on there with Monty Yazzie, who is one of the main critics in Phoenix, and Teresa Dillon, who used to write for Fango.
Okay.
And yeah, that one was a blast. And then we had one on horror music where we all went over like our favorite soundtracks. And I realized then that the Lost Boys soundtrack affected me more than I could ever imagine. It was the first like cassette that I ever asked my parents to buy me. And I listened to it so much that even like while we were on the panel and they were playing one of the songs, I could remember the song that came after it on the tape. Because I listened to it so much and I could like remember the songs that were on side A and side B. And yeah, it was just an interesting thing how much that affected me. And then
I think if you're a horror fan of roughly our age, everyone owned the Crow soundtrack.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Everyone bought that one.
That Cure song, Burn.
Yeah. It's my favorite Cure song.
Yeah. I listened to it every night for like, I think like my entire junior year. Yeah. It was an intense one. I love that. That and the Judgment Night soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
It was like, oh, my God, it's like rap and metal together.
Together in one. It's like Biohazard, and it's got rap in it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I listened to that one a lot. And the Demon Night soundtrack was a big one for me,
Demon Night,
too.
not so much for me, but the other two I'll give you.
Yeah. Demon Knight's still pretty kick-ass. So, but then we also did trivia, which is great.
Right.
I always love taking trivia to other towns because I never know how it's going to be. Like, I know the LA one down. There's a lot of people. They're really competitive. They get shit talky and they will argue with me about everything. No matter what it is, they will argue with me.
Also, there's like the level of knowledge, like, you know, in LA, these are like the most seasoned like professionals that know every detail.
Everything.
Whereas sometimes you go to a different state and you want to, I don't want to say dumb it down, that's not the right word, but you want to make it fun enough that everybody feels like they're doing well.
Yeah, because here in LA, when I go, if two people in the room get a question right, that is like a rights thing for them. That is a pride point, and that's how we shape it, is like, you know, only two people in the room may know this, but that's pride for them.
Yeah.
It's that competitive. But if I'm doing this at a convention, I want everybody who's there to have a lot of fun. So I ask questions that the bulk of the crowd could probably come close to answering.
Right.
Even if they don't get the right answer, they can at least make an educated guess, which
Sure.
is fun. So yeah, and I was really shocked by how well everybody did. There were two teams, the Black Phillips and the Toe Tags, who did awesome.
The Black Phillips.
Yeah, I know. And that was one of my very first questions. I hadn't even seen the team names yet because they hadn't handed in their first answer sheet. So one of my first questions is, what is the name of the goat and the witch? And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's your name. It's
They
cool.
got it.
They did. So they both did amazingly well. And we had a really good turnout. A couple hundred people came to that, which was, it was about as big as the trivia that we do here in LA.
Nice.
So it was awesome. And it was like at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. So I really like wasn't expecting that many people to come. But yeah, we had a great turnout. So yeah, that was the convention. Just overall, the convention, it's a family convention. So I how do I say this? It's a very Pikachu convention overall because there is so much going on. So you see like a lot of like more family friendly stuff. So it was a lot of Pikachu, a lot of, you know, superheroes, things like that. There were Deadpools everywhere. That was by far the most common costume this year. Other things that I noticed is I had no idea about the mad fandom of these mystery boxes. Like I'd seen people, like they have like the Loot Crate or the Box of Dread set up online.
Yeah.
Where every month you pay like $30 and you get a box of, who the hell knows what.
Goodies, just random stuff.
Just goodies. And I've done a couple of those just because I was really interested in them. Fango did a couple of one-shots of them, and they were always fun. Here's my $30. Oh, cool. I got a couple of things you're not expecting. It's a nice surprise. There were probably, just in our area, at least a dozen booths that all they were doing were selling these mystery boxes. And they were themed very broadly, like a video games box, a horror box, a superheroes box. $40 a piece. These booths sold out of mystery boxes before Saturday night. Like, fans were buying like 2 and 3 a piece.
Wow.
And then they would go over to the corner and they would open them up and they would start swapping what they got with other fans to get the things that they want. So like if I got a Pokemon box and I wasn't a Pokemon fan, I might swap with you because you got Doctor Who merch. But I could not believe how popular these things were.
Yeah.
By far the biggest purchases I saw this weekend were these mystery boxes. So yeah, I apparently missed the boat on that one. But and on by Saturday night, I'd seen everybody buying these things, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go get one. And there was a booth next to us that was doing science-themed ones. So you got, like, a couple of science experiments. It was some books and things like that. And I was like, I'm going to go get me one of those. And as soon as I walked over, he was like, we sold out like 3 hours ago.
Wow.
And so that was by far the biggest seller that I saw at the convention.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I had no idea these were quite as popular as they are. And so then the last thing, we had the booth. And the booth was awesome because all of these people who I knew from online, from the Shockwaves page, from Twitter, came by to say hi. Papa Doc, who's one of our regular responders on Twitter, was there to talk with me and hang out. Met a lot of awesome Shockwaves fans. Somebody brought me Twizzlers, which was just awesome.
The ongoing joke and food of Shockwaves.
And we only had, I think we only had maybe 4 of those Shockwaves posters that we had signed.
Oh, that's right.
They were gone like the first day.
That's great.
Yeah. And so I met a bunch of fans, which was awesome. And then we also, because I wanted to have something like, like a photo booth or something like that for people to do at our booth, we brought in this massive torture chair.
Right.
Which was made by our friend BJ Winslow from Dapper Cadaver. And it's this chair that it looks like this torture chair where you're like chained in and you put your arm into this little hidden compartment and then it looks like your arm is caught in this kind of metal teeth thing and it's pouring blood. So it's an optical illusion, but it makes it look like your arm's being ripped off.
Nice.
Really cool thing. Thing is solid wood. So we pull into the loading dock to load the chair in. And they tell us that they only have one dolly, and there's a 2-hour wait for it. Oh. And so Dave and I were like, I'm not going to sit here. It's 120 degrees.
Yeah,
I'm not exaggerating.
That.
120 degrees in Phoenix, and I'm standing outside with this giant wooden chair. And I'm like, I'm not going to fucking wait 2 hours for a dolly. So we decide to carry it down to the booth ourselves. Look at my thighs.
Bruises galore.
I am
Holy
covered. Seriously, I look like I'm like decaying because I have many bruises from it. But we finally got it down there. The chair was by far the biggest hit of the weekend. Like, horror fans would come over because they'd see our trailers playing or they'd see I had the website up on monitors or things like that. But the amount of people that came over just to test out that chair was crazy. So it was worth the amount of pain that my thighs endured carrying that like 100-pound chair down the stairs. I also got a hell of a workout.
Wow.
So yeah, but the chair was
people
awesome.
love those like photo. Like I'd volunteer occasionally for FearNet. We'd do a few of the conventions, and we'd bring the Crypt Keeper, like an actual replica that looks exactly like the Crypt Keeper, and just leave them there for people to take pictures, and they just loved it.
Yeah,
people want something fun like that at a convention.
Yeah, it was so much fun, and people who weren't even into horror, like they would come over and they'd be like, "I don't really even watch horror movies, but can I sit in the chair?"
Yeah,
like yeah, of course you can, and it was just awesome. So we had a lot of fun with the chair, aside from carrying it down myself, and then we carried it back out ourselves too because there was like another wait to get the dolly, and I was like, "We did it once before, let's just go, man." So that was the convention. Oh, and while I was there, they did 2 screenings while I was there. They first one that they did was The Wailing.
Oh,
which was amazing. Did Elric talk about this? Because I know
we both talked about. This is the funny thing about this episode is that because we talked about The Wailing and he was so excited. He was so excited after seeing Night Flyer that he wanted to talk to Mark. But since he couldn't be here for the interview portion, he's like, I might actually listen to this episode. I want to hear what Mark has to say. And now you're going to have to listen to hear what me and Elric think of The Wailing.
Yeah, I know. Well, The Wailing was weird for me because it started out almost comedic. And
this is so funny.
Yeah.
People listening to this are going to be like, oh.
So usually we powwow about this stuff in advance, but today was kind of a rush day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was weird for me because it started out almost comedic. And I was like, I don't know whether I'm supposed to laugh or if I'm like misreading cultural things, but it felt comedic for me.
Yeah.
And then I realized it is comedic. It's supposed to be comedic because they were portraying him so bumbling.
Yes.
And just comedic in some of the timing and the pausing and the way that they were even delivering the lines. And then it gets really fucking extreme.
Very intense.
Very intense.
There's some intense shit in that second half.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Elric and I were saying about it earlier in this episode. And the fact, it's a South Korean cinema manages to balance those tones. I don't know, like you can't get away with it in an American movie, but somehow it works for their aesthetic. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what. But I think it was a cool movie.
It was really cool. And the comedy threw me for a loop, even with the cinematography, because the cinematography matches the second half.
Yeah.
It's very bleak. It's very blue and gray. It's very kind of flat and dark. And yet it's funny in the first part. So it's bizarre. But as soon as it got extreme, I was like, oh, my God, this thing is genius.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's intense, especially for me as a parent. I was like, this is a little rough to get through. But, yeah, really good at the same time. So I highly recommend The Wailing. And then they also did a screening of Conjuring 2, which was the night I got really sick. So it was a midnight screening.
So you missed it.
I missed it. I was like, I'm not going to make it. But the next day, every single person, because apparently it was like a couple hundred people went to see it. So every single person who came up to the booth was like, were you at the Conjuring 2 screening last night? I was like, no, I was dying in a hotel room. And they were like, it's scarier than the first one.
Actually, that's the early word. And I like the first one a lot. I think it's
too.
a great, one of those rare cases of a great studio produced picture. Like, I just saw an interview with James. I think it was a video we posted on our website where he said, I wanted to bring it, he's like, you think The Exorcist, Poltergeist, these were all studio movies. He's like, we could bring it back to making scary movies like that again in the studio system. So I'm excited for it. I like anything James does. So.
Yeah, me too. And everything I heard from fans about this one was awesome. Not a single person said anything bad about it.
Cool.
So I'm super psyched.
We only have a few days to wait, I think.
Yeah, it's
so
almost here.
Excited.
So the last thing I was going to talk about, and I'll be brief with this one, but just something cool for you guys to research. So on the way home, Dave and I had always heard about the Salton Sea. And the Salton Sea is kind of this legendary California place. It was a lake that kind of filled accidentally in the 1900s in the Coachella Valley and became this massive lake, like one of the biggest in California. But it was not like it was a natural forming lake, but it didn't have an output. Like there was nothing leaving the lake. It was just all coming in and then evaporating. And because the Coachella Valley was also filled with all these farms, the majority of what was being pushed into the lake was all of this really pesticide and fertilizer heavy water. They didn't realize that yet. So in the 50s and 60s, they're just like, holy crap, this massive lake has appeared. It's only like an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of LA. Let's turn this into a resort community. So they started building all of these casinos and hotels and resorts around the lake. Then by the 70s, it became clear that the water that was going into the lake was in no way healthy, and it became incredibly polluted. All the fish died. The water got to the point that you couldn't swim in it without it like causing problems with your skin and eyes. Everything around it got crusted with these salt deposits, super, super thick salt deposits. All the fish died, everything. So within a 10-year span between the mid-70s and the mid-80s, everything left the Salton Sea area. So all of these hotels, all of these old resort homes, all the casino-like places and restaurants were just abandoned and have sat there since then. Most of them are now incredibly wind beat. They're all crusted with the salt from the lake, the smell from the lake, because it's still just a big old soup of bad stuff, is just disgusting. But because it is this apocalyptic wasteland where people just abandoned buildings and walked away, and a lot of times just left possessions there because it was these vacation homes, like timeshares, they just left the furniture when they left. So we went and walked through and took pictures, and it was quite possibly one of the most haunting things I have ever seen.
Wow.
The beaches, when you're driving in, because they actually do have beaches, you're driving in and the water is perfectly still because boats don't go on it now because the smell's so bad and there's no fish in there anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just this massive expanse of water, completely still, not a single boat on it in sight. And the beaches are perfectly white. And then once you walk up and start looking, you realize that the beaches are white because it's all crushed bones of fish.
Oh,
it's so haunting. It's so haunting. So there's a couple of really good documentaries about it. One of them's narrated by John Waters. There's still some people who live down there. There's like a couple hundred people who still live around the lake. Some of the craziest characters. While we were down there, this old man came up and was telling us about how Banksy came through a couple of months ago, and they were really excited because he like autographed all of these old like derelict buildings that nobody's in, but we took pictures of it. But yeah, by far one of the most haunting stories I've heard, and just a really fascinating one. So I just wanted to point our horror fans towards that, and I'll be putting up the pictures that Dave took on the site sometime this week.
Yeah, definitely want to see that.
Yeah, so that was just a cool little side road trip.
Wow, well, that was quite an adventurous weekend for you,
It was.
all things considered.
Excuse me. Yeah, so, and as soon as this cough goes away, I'll be back to my normal chipper self.
She's going to go and pass out now.
Yeah.
She's earned it. She's earned it. But we're going to check in with Ryan. Ryan's got a fun pick of the week for you. So stay tuned for that, and then we're going to chat with Mark Pavia. Okay, so it's that time of the show again where we check in with Mr. Ryan Turek, the head of development over at Blumhouse.
Well, hello.
What's up, man?
How are you?
You have a very suspicious Blu-ray sitting in front of you.
That's right.
Is this your pick of the week?
This is my pick of the week, and this is something that, it was introduced to me first on DVD from Blue Underground. And my dad recommended it to me a long, long, long time ago. He's like, if you ever see this movie, you should check this thing out. It's really crazy. Now, what a lot of people don't know about me is I have a soft spot for nature run amok movies.
Yes.
Day of the Animals, Grizzly, it goes out, Kingdom of the Spiders, on and on and on. I love nature run amok movies. I love Mother Earth. And
especially when she gets mad at us.
Yes. And so when Blue Underground put this out on DVD, I fell in love. And then obviously when we were going through the whole transition of DVD to Blu-ray, and we were selling our copies of DVDs, and we weren't upgrading and all that stuff, or we were upgrading, I should say, I was really thrilled when Blue Underground put this title out. And this title is Venom.
Oh, there we go. The suspense.
People
are going nuts there for a minute.
Oh, I know. They really care. Venom is
Klaus Kinski.
Oof. Susan George, Oliver Reed.
What more do you need?
I mean, this thing is like gold. Now, I gave it a revisit now that it's out on Blu-ray. Beautiful, beautiful transfer.
Right.
The flaws started making themselves apparent. I was like, okay, there's a little bit of a pacing issue. But look, guys, this is a movie about a bunch of kidnappers who try to steal this hotel tycoon's grandson, and they get trapped in a townhouse, this 3-floor townhouse with a black mamba. I mean, come on. This is amazing. It becomes a siege. It becomes a kidnapping movie. It becomes a siege movie. It becomes a nature run amok movie. Susan George, offed right away. I'll say spoiler alert, but whatever. It doesn't matter because you guys need to know that she dies a vicious death, and it's amazing. But there's just something really, really fun about the tonal transitions that this film goes through. Because it's funny because the menu screen, I don't know if you've seen this yet, Rob.
I did.
The menu screen is the music lulls you into this kind of state of calm, and oh, this is really nice and sweet. And all of a sudden they start showing these snake attacks on the menu screen, and it completely contradicts the tone of the music. But this is a total fun, drive-in movie. It's just, there's who is it? Nicole Williamson from Excalibur, who played Merlin in Excalibur.
Yeah.
He plays this cop with a past, who is the one who is kind of on the outside. He's like the hostage negotiator. So he's been dealing with Klaus Kinski and Oliver Reed, and trying to get the kid out. But look, man, they use a real black mamba.
Yeah.
They actually give thanks to the zookeeper at the end of this fucking movie. And they're like, yo, zookeeper, thanks for the heads up. No one died.
Yeah.
We got to use this black mamba in real life.
There's something appealing about the danger.
The danger
aspect.
That's the thing. Today, you would have to be all CGI. There would the insurance alone. I mean, come on. It was. They took chances. And if you guys didn't know, this was a movie that Toby Hooper was going to direct.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
He was like 10 days into shooting, I think. And everybody's reports are like why he bailed out, or it like it's all
He
all
didn't want to deal with the
place.
Black Mamba.
Yeah, probably. He was like, oh, fuck this shit. I'm not going to do this. But Piers Haggard came in to direct, and I think he did a really competent job. It's a cool little thriller. The rapport between Kinski and Williamson are fantastic. Kinski is usually hiding behind a curtain. Usually leading his dialogue with Nicole Williamson going, policeman, are you out there? And it's just a good banter between them all. And but again, there's a little bit of a pacing issue somewhere in the middle. But God, it's fun. It's a fun movie, and Oliver Reed is fantastic too. He's like
everything he's in. He's good.
Yeah, he's just like this off. He plays. If I recall, he plays in the film like an actor, like a former actor, and he's like hard up now for cash. And then Susan Jord, pulls him into this plan, and Klaus Kinski is this German thief mastermind, guy
Obviously.
that's wanted by everybody. And so Oliver Reed is just kind of like this dunce, and he's a loose cannon, and he plays it really well. There's one moment in this movie where the snake makes an attack. And they're like, the snake came through the hole in the back of that wall. And Kinski pulls that piece of furniture back, and you see the snake sliding out of the furniture and into the hole in the wall. And it makes your skin crawl, because it's a real fucking snake.
Yeah.
But guys, I mean, like the payoff is fantastic. Payoff is fantastic. There's a great finale. It's a fun little thriller. You don't get to see these many these days.
Yeah, and Blue Underground does a great job. I mean, this Blu-ray looks fantastic. I actually watched it as a double bill with the 7S's.
Oh yeah, yes.
Just to get my snake on for the night. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's just super pulpy, super fun, completely harmless. It's like a harmless little thriller. It's just something you toss on. Unfortunately, it shares a name with a film that came out in like 2005 called Venom. And I don't know if you've seen that
written
one.
by Kevin Williamson?
No.
Was that one?
Yeah.
It has something to do with it, doesn't it?
He did. I don't know what. I was like doing a search on this recently just to satisfy my curiosity because I was like, wait a minute, there was that film in 2005, which also had to do with snakes. Like the snakes were like voodoo snakes.
Yeah, but there's like a killer, right?
There was a killer. And he might have snakes. I don't know. Brian Collins would know this shit,
Starred Agnes Bruckner.
Agnes Bruckner.
Like her.
Yeah. But it was, I forgot how Williamson was connected to that whole thing. But I looked it up and he wasn't credited. So I don't know. But guys, check out Venom. The Blu-ray is fantastic. And yeah, do yourself some good. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
Ryan's pick of the week, Venom. All right, stick around.
All right, thanks, guys.
Alrighty, so welcome back to the show. I'm very excited. I've got a really good friend of mine here on the show this week, and it was important that you guys hear his story for a number of reasons. But first, let me introduce the fellow. He's behind the film that just debuted on Schiller, titled Fender Bender. It's the first Scream Factory release. Welcome to Shockwaves, Mr. Mark Pavia.
Hello.
Hi,
Rob.
we go way back to that Q&A last week from Fender Bender.
And way back. We've known each other a while now.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was in prep for this discussion. Adam Barnick, who's a good friend of mine back east and a contributor to iconsofright.com.
Yes.
God, this was back in 2006.
Was it?
He had done a very extensive interview with you about Night Flyer and about a lot of the stuff that you'd worked on through the years. And the main reason I wanted to have you on is because some people are just discovering you through Fender Bender because it's been getting a pretty good push from Scream Factor. We've been talking about it on the show. Other people remember Night Flyer as like, oh, that was that cool Stephen King movie from the late 90s that I really liked a lot. And you've been consistently working in the business, but the thing is, there's a big gap between Night Flyer and Fender Bender.
You're being kind.
Yes.
A big gap.
But there's a good reason for that.
Yes.
And for a lot of aspiring filmmakers that listen to this sort of thing, that know that they're going to face challenges in the business, you're one of those guys that has faced every challenge in the business.
Yes.
Had a lot of things kind of fall apart the last minute. And yet, every time I've met or hung out with you, you've always been the exact same, enthusiastic, and just kind and really, it's infectious being still in love with movies.
Yeah.
And that was what I thought was important, is like, we need to talk to a guy like you that's still fighting the good fight no matter what.
Yes.
And I'm so happy that you got to make Fender Bender.
Thank you.
I was a long time coming, and thankfully it happened.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes. So let's go back to the beginning, because that's always the fun thing. Most of the people that listen to this and are within our age range are kind of children of the VHS generation, if you will.
Sure.
Was that it for you? Did you see a lot of movies early from the rental days, or was this more like stuff that you caught on TV? I recall a story, I think, about your grandmother being a huge horror fan.
Yes. Well, I've been a movie fan my entire life.
Right.
And going way back, and my grandmother would babysit me when my parents were out working or busy. And she was this great old character with a big old beehive hairdo with like 3 teeth on the side of her mouth. And she would chain smoke, in the suburbs of Chicago. And she was a horror fanatic, so she would, come here, Marky, come sit next to Granny, and she would show me Psycho, and she would show me Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
How old were you at this point? Like really young?
Yeah, I was young. I was 5
okay.
years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I think I got my love of horror from my grandma Millie, Grandma Pavia. And that's my father's mother. So from a very early age, I always loved movies. And I come from a blue-collar family. In the suburbs of Chicago, my father, people laugh at this, but my father's a meat cutter. He's a butcher.
Ironic.
but he's a supermarket butcher. You know what I mean?
Right.
With the white hat and, so it's a very blue-collar family my entire life. And so there's no connection to the business at all, so it was just an innate love of film and filmmaking.
So did that start, the prospect of filmmaking, did that start pretty early on, or were there other paths or things you thought of? Because again, you just said you're a kid that loves movies, but you have no connection to the business at all.
None. And I was just very young. I knew I loved films. I couldn't get enough of them. I watched them on television, constantly. My favorite ones when they would come on, obsessively. And even to the point where, remember those old record albums, those Walt Disney record albums with the pages that turned and you would follow the pictures with the sound and the music. Even, I was always obsessed with music and images and story, until I had a childhood friend whose father had a Super 8 camera. So her name was Sarah Jackson, and she was a friend who lived down the street. She's still a friend of mine. And we grew up together. And I believe this was in Elmhurst, Illinois. And we made a little movie. My very first film was a 3-minute version of Dracula.
Nice.
That I shot with Sarah. I think she was a victim in a white gown.
Right. But you didn't play Dracula. You were the director.
I think I played Dracula, if I remember this correctly. And I told I think it was her father, who was the cameraman, where to how to shoot it,
Yes.
Stand over there and shoot.
Even back then, a demanding teen.
Yeah, dude, I was 6 or 7 years old.
Wow. Okay, so that young. All right.
No, I started very, very, very young.
Yeah. So pretty much it was always a thing for you that you'd be shooting and filming and telling these kind of stories.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but at the same time, I think the thing that a lot of filmmakers do to get attention, especially when there's no ties to the business, is they concentrate on short films.
Sure.
And I know eventually the film that caught a lot of attention was a short you did called Drag.
Yes.
But you had done several leading up to that.
I did.
And I mean, in today's day and age, considering how easy it is for us to get access to things like digital cameras and all that.
It was not easy back then.
It wasn't easy back then. But do you still think that's an important lesson as a filmmaker, to just keep making shorts? Figuring out how to just tell short stories. You have
to figure out your craft, how to do it. So, and the best teachers are the movies themselves, movie theaters, and just watching films on Blu-ray or DVD. And so I was making films my entire as I was growing up through grade school, through high school. I would actually make these 50, 60-minute Super 8 movies that starred my friends. And they were always horror pictures. They were always horror movies.
Right.
And they would actually let me take a classroom over all day in my school and show these movies. All these classes would come in. They'd sit down. We'd watch the movie. They'd clown.
Right.
And then they would leave. And I'd sit there all day and show these films. And eventually, I got a scholarship to film school.
Oh, okay.
To Columbia College in Chicago, based on these shorts, like as you're asking.
Right.
So
right.
it was always, I was always very ambitious, and I always loved what I was doing, and wanted to try to make them as long as possible, just because my imagination was very big. You know what I mean? So my ambition was kind of big.
So they kept expanding. Like the Dracula one was 3 minutes, but then we got to 20 and 30.
Yeah, 20 to 30 up to 60 minutes.
Wow.
So the one that got me a scholarship was actually it might have been 45 minutes to a 60-minute version of Roald Dahl's Lamb to the Slaughter.
Yeah.
Remember, Hitchcock did it
on
Hitchcock Presents, and I love that story, so I did a version of it myself.
Wow.
And it got attention, and it got me a scholarship.
Where is that short now? Do you still have it somewhere? Because these are the things people
yeah,
want to see pop up online.
I think
or I want to see it pop online.
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of this stuff gets lost when you move, a lot, and so we haven't been able to find. I've been looking.
Oh, you have been looking for it.
Yeah,
okay.
and we've been having trouble finding, but my family, my father, and my mom everybody's looking still.
I see. It's going to turn up in somebody's garage one of these days,
right? In a box somewhere. So I went to Columbia College, and you were asking as far as shorts. Yeah, I was always making film and studying and always trying to better my craft. What I would do, and I still do, is I would watch my favorite sequence, say from Carrie, the prom sequence, and I would watch it over and over and over, and I would study it. Why is it working? How's the camera moving? How's the cutting? And I would study it and study it and study it until I got it, until I figured out De Palma. You know what I mean? And I got it.
Yeah.
And then I would move on.
Yeah, I mean, these are the days before commentaries, and you'd have to dig into books and see if you could find a little essay about the making of Carrie and shooting that scene.
Yeah,
or just watching it over.
Or just watching it over and over. And one of the books, and you'll appreciate this because you're such a huge Hitchcock fan like I am, is remember that illustrated Psycho book that had the individual frames from the film?
Yes, I have it. Yeah,
yeah. You remember that thing?
It's like a picture book, and it's just all the pictures of the entire movie.
Yeah, almost like the storyboards in a weird way.
Yeah,
it's just every shot.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because then you could there were little things in that book. I forget they're called, and I think they made a few of them for
film study,
something like that. And you get to see every frame. But it was like I got to analyze and read the letter that Sam wrote to Lila because there's the still of it.
Yeah, remember when it fades up, it's really quick, and you're trying to read it.
Yeah, I mean, not until you could pause it on DVD.
I was always trying to read it. I would be running up to the television. But
yeah.
Anyway. So I would study that book, to study how Hitchcock did it. You know? So I would, there was the most influential filmmakers in my life, are Alfred Hitchcock, Steven Spielberg, John Carpenter.
Yep. Still the master, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, those three are my top cats. You know what I mean? Like those guys taught me everything. And then of course there's Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, George Romero. So I mean, the list. David Cronenberg. We could go on and on and on,
and we will.
But those three are the ones who taught me everything. You know, those about filmmaking. I mean it as far as visual storytelling. So so practicing your craft, right? So I would study, study, and then trying to replicate what I learned as far as camera movement, cutting, composition. It's not just how you move a camera, but how you move people within a frame.
Yeah,
as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I ask you about drag, I need to thank you. Mark and I are sipping some wine, courtesy of Mr. Francis Ford Coppola.
Cheers.
Thanks. Salut. So again, the short film that got a lot of attention for you was Drag.
It was. Yeah.
And what's the story behind that? Was that intended to do that? Was it intended to be a calling card?
Yeah.
Or was it just the next short?
Okay. So I went to Columbia College, and hey, we're going in order, telling my story. So
chronologically, baby.
Yeah. Narrative storytelling.
Right.
You know what I mean? Building character.
There you go.
So I went to, and I already knew how to make films at this point, you know. But I had never worked, but I did everything on my own, with my friends. I did the camera, I did the cutting, I did the, I put the soundtrack together. But what was great about going to Columbia is now I'm suddenly thrust into a situation where I had to work with a group of people.
Yes.
Yeah, and communicate what I want, from a group, and I had never done that before. So that was really great. So I went to Columbia, and I became a TA as well. So it was kind of cool because I was TAing master classes. You know what I mean? I was 18 years old, And I was like a TA for, the Hitchcock class. It was crazy.
That's great.
Who's this punk? You know what I mean? But it worked out. And we would actually show the actual films. And anyway, so I'm at film school. Oh, this is great. I haven't talked about this in a long time. My very first teacher at Columbia College, who's my favorite teacher. I have two favorite teachers from Columbia College, but he was amazing, is Mark Pavia. Who's a big screenwriter now in Hollywood.
Okay, you're looking at me like, come on, you must know. And I'm like, wait, refresh my memory. What did he do afterwards?
I knew him as Mark Pro back in the Columbia College days. And now he's a big screenwriter in Hollywood. So I always thought that was really cool. You know what I mean? And I loved Mark. And he was just so enthusiastic about my enthusiasm. In other words, so he knew I was really into it, and he loved that I was doing horror, and he encouraged it. Like, when you're young and you kind of go in and I want to make horror movies, and people are kind of being, not all film schools are pretentious. I don't want to say that because it's not true, because you should actually study or explore more personal stories in film school, because when you get out into the professional world, you have to be a little more commercial.
Of course. But
I was always that commercial guy. You know what I mean? I was always in love with commercial filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I always loved the movies of John Carpenter,
right.
Steven Spielberg.
I think Elric told this story 2 episodes ago, so now I'm paraphrasing a paraphrase. But I think he said it was, maybe it was Paul W. Anderson, who makes kind of, those kind of commercial films. I think his first day at NYU, the teacher's like, if you're here to make movies like Terminator 2, then just get out of here. And he's like, hey man, I like Terminator 2. Got up and left. It's like, yeah, that's a fun movie. Like,
So I was this young guy, and I was making horror pictures, and I just wanted, and Mark Pavia, who I loved, and I still love, really, he saw some ability there.
Yeah.
And that I took it serious. All my films have always been, there was never a glimmer in the eye. Like, I never wink at the audience.
Yeah.
I take it serious, and we can talk about that as we go. As you know, the films, have always been, not self-referential or anything like that. Which it's fine, but it's not what I'm into.
Yeah, it's not what you want to do.
It's not what I want to do. So anyway, I started making films there. And I actually, I'm not sure if I don't talk about this much. I actually made, a couple years in, I made a 16 millimeter 1 hour movie shot by Janusz Kaminski.
Right. Who has gone on to do...
Now, he's Spielberg's
he's
DP.
Spielberg's DP.
So he won the Academy Award for Schindler's List.
Right.
Saving Private Ryan.
So he shot your movies and Spielberg's movies.
Yeah. Well, we were all at the film school. We were at film school at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was always this group of people together. It was crazy. It was Janusz Kaminski, Mauro Fiore, and it's a group of people who would go on to work in the industry. But anyway, so we shot this movie called Unexcused Absence about a high school teacher who's like... who hates his students, and he wants to make them smarter. So he comes up, it's almost like a reanimator thing. He comes up with a serum that he injects into their neck, you know what I mean? But it turns into these mindless zombies.
Oh, God, we need that serum now for kids these days.
So I made this movie, and that got attention, at the Chicago Film Festival and stuff like this. And then a couple years after that, I said, I need a calling card for LA, for Hollywood, because I knew I wanted to come to Los Angeles, to make movies. And one thing you should always do as far as, finding a mentor, even if it's, not that these mentors, but someone you read about, you emulate, not copy, but learn from their successes and their mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. So I was studying about how Spielberg broke in to the industry, and he's broke in with a really excellent short film called Amblin that he spent some money on that showcased his abilities.
Yeah.
So I'm breaking in with a short film like he did.
Yeah. No, I mean it's the logical. That's the thing I think about interview shows, or even all of our previous episodes as Killer Preview are shockwaves. Everybody has a slightly different story, but we all learn from the last person, and we kind of find our own path that way.
It was really exciting too, because. And I was going to do it with a horror picture because, of course, it's interesting because people always say, like, why do you always make horror? Why only horror? And I'm like, you're assuming I have control over that.
Right.
Like when I sit down and write, it's what comes out. It's just what I'm attracted to.
These are the stories you want to tell.
These are the stories I want to tell.
Yeah.
And I love how pure they are as far as, as far as the cinematic tools are concerned.
Right.
It's all about image and sound and music. And,
Yeah.
It's
Well,
very
let me
pure.
let me ask you this about that time period when you were at your most kind of you were being influenced by these kind of films. I already know that you love the classics. You
Yeah.
know, obviously we all grew up on Jaws
Yeah.
and Psycho and all that stuff.
Sure.
But I'm always fascinated by what was your reaction as a young horror fan to the latest works from people like John Carpenter and Wes Craven? Like as that stuff was coming out in the 80s and into the 90s,
yeah.
because you read, I've been doing a lot of research on The Thing lately, and it's like it's a freaking masterpiece. Like every time I watch it, I'm like, it's a perfect movie.
Perfect movie.
And to know that it was so hated upon its release. So do you remember?
Even by viewers, too.
Viewers, yeah. The audiences could not
I
get
loved
into it. And that's that's the funny thing. So like a lot of Carpenter's movies throughout the 80s, for example, were not well received
I loved
upon
every
release.
John Carpenter movie.
So as they were coming out, you saw through all that.
Yes.
And
I don't care about what other people think. I care what I think. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm never influenced by that or by critics. Or it's just as fans of these movies, I saw every John Carpenter movie that I could in the theater. And I saw Escape from New York in the theater. You know what I mean? I saw The Fog in a movie theater. And that's why I love my father, because I was underage, of course. So my dad would take me, and I think he knew I could handle it.
right.
If I couldn't handle it, he wouldn't have done it. He's a very kind, gentle man, intelligent guy, loving guy. And he knew my obsession with film. And I begged him to take me to The Fog. I'll never forget that. So we're at one of these theaters in Joliet, Illinois.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of these old movie palaces. And I'm talking back before they were, chopped up into the mall theaters. This is, there must have been 1,000 seats in there.
Yeah.
Right? So we're waiting in the lobby for the movie to come out. Let's say it's the 8 o'clock movie. So we're there at like 7:45 or something.
No advance tickets. You got to wait for the
we
next
had to
show.
wait. We had to wait.
in
So
those days.
we're standing with my dad, and we're in the lobby, and the doors are closed. And all of a sudden, I start hearing screams coming from the theater. And I was just like looking at the doors with my eyes were bugging out. And he looked down at me, and he's like, "You sure you can handle this?"
Oh, that's so great.
And I'm like, "Yeah, we could do it." So we went in there, and it was this. It was a huge screen. That great first scene with John
Yeah.
Houseman and the music and the
God.
story. Oh my God! And I've always loved John Carpenter. You know what I mean? And just the way he tells stories, the way he shoots, the beautiful Dean Cundy images.
Yeah.
And I'm not a hater, man. This is not who I am. I'm one of those people. I'm an optimistic guy, and I look for what's good.
Yeah.
I look for what's good in people.
Yes.
I look for what's good in movies. I look in music, in the industry. I don't look at the negative. I look at the good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's enough negativity
Exactly.
in the world. What I mean?
That's been the mantra of our show all along. Is like, people always ask, like, well, why don't you talk about movies you don't like or this and that? I was like, because for every movie I don't like, that negative energy, I have 10 more I want to recommend to you that I do love.
Yeah.
So let's.
And no one sets out to make a bad movie.
No,
and it's so hard to make a movie. And
I
people,
think it's funny. The thing about modern film criticism is, obviously you're bringing your own life experiences into how you feel about a movie when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are being a reviewer, if this is your job, you have to think of the audience. So, back in Long Island, in the Long Island days, I'd go see movies and people there didn't give a crap about movies. It was their Friday night thing to do, like the jocks and all that stuff. And they'd come out of the theater like, that freaking sucked. And all I could think is like, really, like everything that just happened in the last 90 minutes sucked. There was not a single thing that you liked. You spent $10 for your Friday night, and the whole thing sucked. Like you didn't like a scene or an actress or a piece of music or something. So I always try to think about that. Even if there's a movie that I'm not vibing with, I like to think, well, you know what? There's these elements that I know most people will get off on, even if it wasn't my thing. So I don't know. I think it's good to find the good in everything.
And when I was very young. I'm sorry, we're jumping back and forth all the
It's
time.
fine.
We're cross-cutting. We're in a flashback time. Flashback. So we would get the Sunday paper and all these advertisements for, let's say, Friday the 13th. Would come out. I would, every Sunday I'd get my scissors and I would cut out the advertisement and I would hang it on my wall and I would just like stare at this advertisement.
Stare at this ad.
And I would just envision what it would be like, this movie. And I was just, I still feel that way today that I felt when I was 10 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. That's great.
And I'm lucky to still have that in me.
Right.
I never lost it. Yeah.
So the movie Drag you made, and
Yes,
it was
Drag. Let's get to
kind of a zombie sort of movie at a time when that wasn't a very common
No one
thing.
was making zombie films.
Right, and then this
I mean,
was
Peter Jackson was, like with his
like the Bad Taste and
but not like a George Romero classic
style
zombie movie, right?
Right. So that's what yours was
Right.
kind of a post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
thing with one, if I recall correctly, it was like one last survivor dragging a body around.
Yeah, a woman,
Hence
a
the
lone
title.
woman alive in a dead world, and she's dragging a dead body.
Was this in black and white? I can't remember.
We shot in color,
Right.
and then I drained all the color out, and then I made it sepia tone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it was weird because I couldn't imagine a post-apocalyptic zombie world in color.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's make it like the beginning of The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Look at like that.
That's
and
cool.
so we did that. And what's weird is, so Janusz Kaminski shot, on excuse absence, Academy Award winner.
Yeah.
Mauro Fiore shot Drag, Academy Award winner, for Avatar. He won the Oscar for Avatar.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a lot of Academy Awards right there.
That's weird, right? So, anyway, so we went out there. My buddy Dan Kern produced it, and Jennifer Howe, his wife, friends of mine, and they went out and they produced it, and we shot that thing in Lockport, Illinois, where I went to high school, where I grew up, and it was about a 40-minute zombie thing,
Yeah.
and it came out really great.
Yeah.
And I got the prints. And like you were asking before, the commitment to making these early shorts. Like, in the digital era, it's much, much, much easier. That computer you're looking at right there.
Sure.
You could do anything you want on that computer right there.
Yeah.
But back then, we had to haul around film cans, and we had to, the negative, and we had to pay for that negative, and we had to get that negative out of the lab, and, it took commitment. Even
Yeah.
when you were cutting, those cans were heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was weird, and then we cut on a flatbed, and, but it was a lot of fun, and it turned out really well. And then we started showing the movie. I had some screenings in Chicago that started generating interest. And then I was invited, I'm trying to remember now, but I believe I was invited to a Fango convention.
Right.
By my buddy, Tony Timpone.
Tony. Yeah, if I remember correctly, you were making VHS copies and sending them pretty much to everybody you could.
Everybody.
Which again, I mean, there are
VHS copies.
VHS back in
Yes,
those days when
baby,
you made a copy.
So we had those boxes,
Yeah.
with the sleeve.
Yep.
And then we printed up the sleeve, and I
Yeah.
stuffed it, and it was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
and
an assembly line.
something about the presentation in those days of
Yeah.
getting this tape in the mail and be like, I wonder what this is. Today's modern equivalent is obviously you can finish your film and put it on YouTube right away. But now there's a much bigger pool.
It's-
How do you stand out?
Yeah, but it was very, it's instant now, almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where back then you had to work it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we had a screening at FangoCon in New York, I believe it was.
Yep.
And Tony loved it. I believe Mike Gingle was there, and I believe so. But definitely Tony, who dug the picture.
Right.
And talked about it and championed it. And then we started sending the movie out, like you said. I sent it to every producer I could send it to.
Uh-huh.
And remember that book back in the days? I forget what it was called. It was kind of like a Hollywood phone book or something. I forget what it was
Yeah,
called. It was a book.
I was going to ask you, how did you get these addresses?
Well,
and
it was
stuff?
like this book because so film school, and I'm in Chicago. I'm down. I was 18 years old, 19, 20 years old, living downtown Chicago, and which was a trip, being young and living in downtown Chicago. But it was great. And there was a bookstore right there, and I would go, and I'm a book fanatic. I can't get enough of bookstores. I'd spend hours in bookstores and record stores.
Yeah.
And they had these books where you could get these addresses, for Amblin Entertainment. And it would have the address. It was crazy. Like these industry reference books. Remember just industry reference books?
Right.
So I got all these addresses. I'd run in with a notebook, and I'd just copy all these addresses down, just one after the other. And I'd run back to the dorms, and I would just make these labels. But Drag was, an interesting situation. And then I sent it. So this is how it happened. So then I sent a copy to Richard Rubinstein in New York City because he was one of my favorite producers because he produced all the great George Romero horror pictures.
Yeah, all the early stuff. Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, his
Martin.
very first one was Martin.
Yeah.
Which is still an amazing
Yep.
vampire movie. And then Dawn of the Dead, Creepshow, Knight Rider,
Yeah.
you know, Day of the Dead,
Yeah.
which I loved. Day of the
Yeah,
Dead.
yeah.
And then Richard would go on to do, you know, Pet Sematary, of course, and he had starting, you know, they always had this relationship with Stephen King. So we'll
Right.
get there in a second. But anyways, he was always one of my favorite producers. I'm sending it to Richard Rubinstein.
Yeah.
So I got his address pretty easily. Laurel Entertainment at the time in New York. And then I said, I'm sending one to Stephen King. I told my friends, I'm sending a copy to Stephen King.
Yeah.
And they're like, F you. How are you going to get it to Stephen King? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to figure out a way to get it to Stephen because he was my favorite writer.
Yeah.
And I love Stephen King. So if you love horror, you love Stephen King.
Yeah.
So I kind of went into stalker mode. You know what I mean?
Here, the truth finally comes out all these years later.
So I know, I just
He's
kinda,
not easy to get to, so.
and I kind of figured out how to get him. I don't want to talk too much about that, but I kind of figured out a way to get it to him by looking at some various pictures and reading some various articles. I kind of figured out where and how, and
I see.
yeah. So I was very clever about it.
I'm sure he's a lot more guarded nowadays than back then.
Yeah, so which is true actually.
Yeah.
Because we're still friends, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very, very true. So
You got it.
I
to
got
him.
this. Well, I got this address, and I just put it in an envelope, and I said hi. I wrote a little letter to Stephen King, and I sent it to this address, not even knowing if it would really get there, or if
Right.
I was actually correct in this address. You know what I mean? Because wow, there was no internet then. you know,
Yeah.
so
But you did, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
you did get a phone call from Sam Raimi, who also had a copy of this VHS tape. Is that true?
yeah. Wow. No. Okay.
What was
so
the Sam Raimi
now-
story?
Oh, okay. Back up. So the Sam Raimi story. God,
Yeah.
I know everybody now. So
We
it's
can't- we
weird.
can't pass
No,
that.
we can't pass it because he's amazing.
Right.
This went on for years.
Yeah.
Actually, my relationship with him. He actually saw Unexcused Absence. Remember I was telling you about that
Oh,
one?
that's short.
The high school
Oh,
movie
okay,
one.
yeah.
So he was at a FangoCon. It was in, I want to say it was either in Chicago or Detroit. Okay, it was in the Midwest. And it was back in the day where he was just coming off of Darkman. And he was showing just clips, and I was in the audience going, oh my God, this is amazing. Because this was his first film right after Evil Dead 2.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, he was just getting into that Universal era where he's
Yeah.
doing Dark Man Army, Darkness.
And
all
of course,
that
I saw
stuff.
Evil Dead, blew my mind, loved it. And then I saw Evil Dead 2, I saw in the theater. What? And it was incredible.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
Darkman. So he was at a FangoCon, so I was in love with Sam Raimi. And just his kinetic visual style, And he was showing, it was an auditorium, and he was just showing clips off a little video projector thing up on a screen. And then after he showed these clips and everybody claps, he just went into the dealer room and was walking around, And I went up to him, I was like, Mr. Raimi?
You were that kid.
Yeah, I was that kid. And he turned around, and he's like, yes. And I'm like, I made this movie, and I don't know, would you watch it? Sure, kid. He was very good-natured. He took the movie,
Yeah.
and he called me.
Yeah.
He called me 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, it's amazing.
And he was like, this is really good.
wow.
He's like, this is a really good film, and please keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
Because you're going to make it. And to get encouragement from Sam Raimi
Yeah.
as a young filmmaker and just in college was incredible. And it meant a lot. And I stayed in touch. He stayed in touch over the years. And we kind of lost track over the last 10 years, let's say. But we always, like around town, we might see each other, and we kind of point, and
I
he
know
smiles
you.
and points, and he
You're
smiles.
that kid.
Yeah. Well, even, my 30th birthday, he sent me a signed poster. And stuff.
that's
Yeah, I mean,
great.
he's amazing.
See, I think the lesson there is like it's not like some filmmaker that you grew up loving is going to magically see your film and be like, "I'm going to take you with me, kid," or whatever.
No.
But just getting that vote of confidence from somebody
It's
like that,
everything.
all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm a peer. I could do this.
He made movies I loved, and he said he liked my film. It was a stamp of approval, and that meant everything.
Right.
So when some hater,
And there are many.
or some teacher, you won't make it at all, kid. Then I'm like, Sam Raimi told me I would make it. No, so he saw that film. So then flash forward to 2-3 years, and then I'm sending it to Stephen King. I always kind of think big. You know what I mean? I'm not
Sure.
afraid to think big, and I always say swing for the fences, and if you get a solid double, well, good for you. You know what I mean? But what if you hit the home run?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. You never know.
What are you afraid of? Success? And a lot of people are, actually. So that's a different story.
Right.
But so I sent it to Richard Rubinstein, and I sent it to Stephen King separately. Little did I know, and I did not know this, they were making a miniseries at the same time. And it was...
The Stand.
It was Mick Garris's The Stand.
That's right, yeah.
Hi, Mick. He's a great guy. I love Mick.
He listens.
Oh, yes.
So hi, Mick.
Hi, Mick. Yeah, and Mick saw Drag as well. And,
cool.
Called and said he really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And so he's always been an amazing guy. But anyways, they were producing The Stand at the time. And I believe it was Steven, they had Night Flyer in development. It hadn't been in development for a few years at that point. I want to say 5-6 years. They couldn't figure out how to make the movie. Because Richard Rubinstein, I did not know this. Okay, so this is the stuff I did not know. Richard Rubinstein had rights to Night Flyer from Steven to make into a feature. And they really couldn't figure it out how to do it. So Steven, if I remember correctly, he took a crack and just kind of like, wasn't feeling it. There was another writer that took a crack that wasn't, Steven didn't really like where it was going. I found out later.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they saw that he did watch my movie, but this is before I knew he watched my movie. And he really, really liked it. So he came into the office one day and said to Richard, I got this movie in the mail, and it's really good. And what about Pavia for Night Flyer? And he's, before I got to that, he goes, I got this movie, and it's about this zombie, and it's about this woman dragging this dead body through a zombie-plagued world. And Richard's like, I got that movie too.
Right.
That movie was badass, you know what I mean? And they were loving it together. And then Steven at that point said, well, what about him for Night Flyer? And Richard's like, well, that's a really interesting idea. And so I get a phone call. Okay, it's crazy. I mean, I realize what this story is today.
Yeah.
After being here a few
But
years.
at the time when you're in the thick of it,
I didn't
it doesn't
even, or
mean...
when I'm young.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know, people tell me, wow, this is the craziest Cinderella story I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean? But you don't know it when you have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
Okay. So
yes, this is what happened. This is unbelievable. Tell us what happened.
So so Richard Rubinstein, the great producer, calls me in Chicago. Hi, is this Mark? Hold for Richard Rubinstein, you know. Hi. He's like, Mark. So, hi, Richard. Wow, we really loved your movie. Drag, thanks. Hey, we have this story called Night Flyer. We're trying to make into a movie. Do you know it? And, of course, when you're a Stephen King fanatic, you know all the stories. And I was a King fanatic still.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, the Vampire Pilot movie, or story. He's like, yeah, we're making it into a movie. We want to hear, like, how you might make it for us. Like, what? He's like, yeah, we want to fly you to New York to pitch the movie. I didn't even know what that term meant.
Right.
I'm like, why are they talking about baseball? Why are they talking? Pitch? No, you describe how you would make this movie if you were going to make it. Oh, right. Got it. So 2 weeks later, I couldn't believe it. And so 2 weeks later, they fly me and my writing partner at the time is Jack O'Donnell, who was a buddy I went to film school with.
Right.
And we were working together at this time, a good friend of mine. And they flew both of us out and to talk to who I thought was just going to be Richard, Mitchell Galen, his co-producer, his partner at Laurel, and Neil Stevens, the story editor at Laurel at the time. You know, I remember they were making Tales from the Dark Side at this time and all that stuff. And so we walk in. So we land in New York. A limo picks us up. Is this crazy? They drive us to. So you know, Richard knows how to treat people, man. You know what I mean? He does it right. You know. So the car picks us up, takes us to the office. We go in. He's showing me around, and he's showing me all the cool stuff, like you have. Rob, in your place. Rob has great stuff in his place, everybody. It's amazing.
People have seen some of the pictures.
Yeah, so like Rubenstein's kind of showing me everything. And he's like, oh, yeah, and by the way, Steve's coming. And I'm like, Steve? He's like, Steven, he wants to meet you.
The King?
I'm like, Stephen King's coming? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, great, yeah, no problem. So he's like, oh, I'll be right back. So he shuts the door, and I look at Jack. I'm like, oh, my God, oh, shit. You know, I was freaking out.
Like in 10 seconds, he's going to walk through the door?
Yeah, because we were going to have lunch. And he's like, yeah, Steve's coming. He wants to meet you. He flew down from Maine to meet you.
Wow.
I was like, okay. And I was like, oh, no. I was so nervous. So they took us into a conference room, and they ordered lunch. And we were just kind of bullshitting, and then the door opened, and I kind of looked over, and there was Stephen King. And he was like looking at me, and I was just kind of looking at him. It was just kind of a weird moment because it's like the back of a book jacket pictures
come to life.
Yeah, it was really weird. So, but he looked at me. The first thing he said is, he looks at me, he's like, he smiles, and he's like, "Life's a drag, baby, then you die," you know, which is the tagline of drag.
Right, right.
And then he gave me a big bear hug. And I was, within 5 minutes, I was incredibly comfortable. It was like just talking to a happy, supportive uncle.
Right, right.
And he just loved drag and wanted to hear. And so I prepared the entire movie, A to Z, on these little note cards, like each scene.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Hey, do we have a way to play music?" And they're looking at me like, "What?" I'm like, "I write to soundtrack music."
Yeah.
And they were looking at me like, "Okay, like let's, appease the kid." So I think it was a Christopher Young CD.
Okay. I was going to be, do you remember what you
Yeah,
played?
I think it's a Christopher Young CD, and it might have been Jennifer A.
That's one of his.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
Good one.
yeah, it's a good one. So they put the CD on, and there's like this creepy music,
Uh-huh.
and then I start going, scene one. I do sound effects. I mean, that's me, you guys. That's me doing the wind.
Explaining the whole
And we're
thing.
craning down, and I started explaining this movie.
Yeah.
And I was going through just talking to Steven and Richard, and they're just like looking at me, all like caught up in it. And Steven's like, yeah, that's awesome. And maybe you can do that. And the best compliment I've ever gotten in my life is when I was going through, I forget which scene it is. I think it's towards the end when he goes into Dwight Renfield's plane and sees the inside view stuff, like in the belly of the plane.
Right.
And that wasn't in the short story, and we'll get to that in a moment. But, and the best, and Stephen King's like, "Yeah, man, I should have thought of that too." I was like, "Oh yeah, right." But he meant it. It was incredible.
Yeah.
He's so generous that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I went through, it took an hour, and a week later I had the job.
Wow.
We flew home, and I had the job. And we wrote 6 drafts of that script in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And
Crazy.
I mean, considering the amount of experience you had doing the shorts and stuff like that, I mean, I feel like you were ready for this opportunity
I was
no
ready.
matter what.
Yeah.
So was it, first feature, was it fairly smooth?
Yes.
It was.
It was incredible.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
right out of the gate.
It was crazy. So everybody was, okay, so Night Flyer. Oh, we're at Night Flyer. Right?
We're at Night
So,
Flyer.
yeah, Night Flyer. So, King and
And so you
Rubenstein-
expand on this short, because it's a short story.
Yes.
And I always thought with King's material,
Yeah.
it's much easier when you take a giant novel that he's got so much, he's worked it out, this world, and there's so much richness to it,
Yeah.
to try to condense that
Yes.
seems like a disservice. However,
Yeah.
I always found his best movies were the shorts
Yes.
that you could expand upon.
Right.
Because you've got the great King idea.
Yeah.
Now what else can we do with it? So
Right, but the difficulty they've always had over the years of getting The Stand into a motion picture. Mick had to do it. He did a great miniseries, but he
Yes.
took 4 or 5 nights. Right?
or maybe
4 nights.
2 or 3? I don't
No,
know.
it was 4. I think it was 4.
It's a lot, right? Yeah. It's been a
So
lot.
he had to.
Yeah, it's the only way.
It's the only way to do it. And that's why even today they're having a little more difficulty with it, and they have to make 2 movies out of it.
Yeah.
Which I'm so happy they're doing, by the way.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the better, the great thing about the short story, I think it was about 40 pages, about 40 pages. And I just took it, and what I wanted to do was stay as faithful to Stephen King as possible because it's his story. It's not my story. It's Stephen King's story. And you know that feel when you read a Stephen King story? I wanted to bring that to the movie or try to maintain the feeling of a Stephen King story.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to take the feeling of King, infuse what I could bring to it, and try to make it successful. So I took this short story, working with Jack, and we added the Catherine Blair, the female reporter, because I thought that Dees needed someone to bounce off of and fight with, not just his kind of crazy journey into hell, which is basically what it is. So I added him, her, to fight with him.
It's good. It gives him competition. And also kind of that threat of like, here's somebody coming to take your place sort of deal.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted her journey to be, from being the innocent ingenue reporter and kind of see how she, at the spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Night Flyer, but how she turns into someone darker who's, who turns into Dees basically at the end of the movie. So I added her, Jack and I added her. And then the entire ending of the movie was was original. Like the short story ends in the bathroom. So the vampire goes, "Don't follow me anymore."
Right.
And then Dees kind of goes and looks out the window and the plane flies away. And I said, it's a great ending for a short story, but I couldn't end a movie that way.
Yeah.
So I added the entire sequence of hell, like where the
Yeah,
vampire.
we gotta.
You know.
All right, so just to elaborate, hopefully, if you're listening, you've seen Night Flyer.
Yeah,
and
spoiler
if
alert.
Not, how the hell can we get this thing? It's on DVD. It was on DVD,
Yeah.
right? And then it went out of print, or what happened?
Yeah, so we'll get back to the making of that movie in a second, but as far as the DVD, it's out of print right now, yeah.
The DVD's out of print because I know it was out on DVD at one point, and it took me a while to track down the DVD.
Yeah.
Courtesy of you.
And our friends, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, is that one of those titles that, and I don't know if you can talk about it or not, but because HBO was part producer on it, did they
No, we
co-produce
made the
it, or
movie-
you sold it to HBO?
Yes.
Okay.
We made the movie completely independently. Oh, so this is a great story for our crowd.
Right.
So, oh God, there's so much to talk about. I hope you guys like these stories. Are these good? Are these stories good?
This is
these good?
educational. You need to learn from other people's experiences.
So, we wrote the script. We got ready to shoot, and we scouted locations, and we ended up scouting and choosing Wilmington, North Carolina. There was a little bit of a wait between the writing of the screenplay and the shooting of the film because it was a period in which Laurel Entertainment was turning over to New Amsterdam Entertainment. Because Spelling at that time, I'm sorry, but Spelling owned Laurel at the time, and they were separating, and Richard was setting up a new company. So there was a little bit of a waiting period. So during that period, I actually storyboarded the entire movie. Every frame of that movie, I storyboarded because I had the time to do it.
Wow.
So I spent pretty much a year storyboarding Night Flyer. And we went down there and shot that movie, man, and we shot that film in 30 days for about $5 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which by today's standards, that's like amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. And the airports, that's a set at the end. The
Oh,
interior-
really?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
No, it's
a
great.
beautiful set.
I did when I was I revisited right before he came in. And I was trying to. There's so much stuff about it technically that
Yeah.
I'm like, man, how did he do that? Because you're dealing with planes and elaborate sets and stuff like that. But and K&B,
K&B.
I was reminded. I was like, oh, they did the
Howard
effects on
Berger
this.
was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
on-set guy.
Yeah,
and Greg,
yeah.
me and Greg were hanging out. Yeah, so I got the movie, and I wrote the script with Jack, and it turned out great. And Steve, so Steve would read each draft and give his little notes, and he was very involved in the film. You know how people go, King had nothing to do with Night Flyer. Yes, he did. He hired me with Richard. He discovered me out of film school with Richard.
He'll let you know when he's not involved.
Yeah, he was
Which has been
very
like,
involved
you know.
in Night Flyer, and he was happy to be involved. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think he just dug it. Gave us his blessing. He was going to make a cameo, but he was busy on a book tour at the time. I think it was Green Mile book tour.
Oh wow.
And he was going to be the morgue attendant.
Yeah.
And that
would have been fun.
That would have been hilarious. He wanted to do it, but he wasn't in the country.
All right.
So we shot the picture, and it turned out amazing. And we had 6 months of post in New York City. I was living in Times Square.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Isn't that crazy?
posting on this movie? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it was crazy.
Amazing.
And Michael Gornick was my post supervisor. Now, Michael Gornick was the DP on Creep Show.
Wow.
He shot Dawn of the Dead.
That's amazing.
What, are you crazy? It was amazing.
Yeah.
So like between everything, I'd be like, Mike, talking about Dawn of the Dead. I was losing my mind. I
Our
was so
royalty.
happy.
Everywhere you go.
It was insane. I was so happy. So we were we cut the picture. Is this what you're asking about? How it got
you made
to,
it. You made it essentially as an independent movie. I
we
didn't
made
realize
it,
that.
Richard
completely
Rubenstein
on your own.
Yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. So Richard got the money completely independently. I think some investors in the U.S. and some. This is what the great thing is. He had some investors out of in Europe, and he used the actual Dawn of the Dead contracts. Because it was the same investors. And he literally scratched out Dawn of the Dead, wrote in Night Flyer, and used the same contracts.
So those are the same people that paid for this movie, essentially.
Yes, the same people who made Dawn of the Dead made Night Flyer.
Wow.
And then we finished the picture, and we started showing around to the Hollywood studios, and we got a lot of interest. And actually, Paramount Pictures wanted it to pick it up, for major distribution, but they didn't have they wanted to do a Halloween release, and they didn't have a hole in their schedule. Because you know how they have it booked for over a year.
Sure,
and a half.
sure.
So they had to say, but we're going to hold the movie for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then Richard made a decision not to do that. And I understand why, because he had a responsibility to investors.
Right. Get it out there, get the money back.
He has to get money back, or potentially get the money back for his investors. And it's we all wanted it. He wanted it too, but we made a choice to go with HBO. Loved it. They wanted it, so they bought it as a original movie.
Right.
So that's how it got onto HBO.
HBO here in America, but then it came out overseas theatrically.
Yeah, played in Japan and played in Italy. It was a big hit in Italy, actually.
Wow.
And the weird thing is, it did go theatrical in the U.S. It was seen by New Line Cinema on HBO, and they ended up releasing the movie on like 100 screens in the U.S. after the HBO premiere.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm trying to remember how I discovered it. I think it must have been on HBO. It must have been a cable thing.
I hear that from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, that movie freaked me out when I was a kid. They'd have nightmares,
Well, it's like the delicious irony of a vampire who's a pilot who flies around. I just love it.
Sleeps in the belly of his plane.
It's so great.
Well, that's Stephen King.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It's a Stephen King concept through and through.
Yeah, and then so I just, like I said, I just took it very seriously, and didn't make fun of it, and respected the work. And I think it feels like King because I was really trying to make it have that feeling,
right? With
the look of it, the sound, the music.
And what did the movie do for you professionally? Because you work hard on this thing. It's got name recognition, obviously through King. It comes out on HBO here. It gets a small theatrical overseas.
Yeah.
You're, as it is with this business, you're hot the week something happens.
Yeah.
And then maybe not so much after that, So you have to act fast. So was there a lot of interest, a lot of talk about things? So what did you learn and get out of the Night Flyer experience?
Well, it was it was successful in that way. It got good reviews in the horror press, which how horror pictures are. Like in the horror press, we tend to get good reviews, but like straight press don't really get us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For the most part. But this one seemed like it was fairly well reviewed across the board.
It was. But the horror press really loved it, and they did. I think it's kind of grown on people over the years. You know what I mean? But John Carpenter's the thing.
Yeah.
Not that it has, there's no comparison between.
Although I will say one of my favorite sequences, and Elric talked about it in the opening of this episode, is that mild spoiler if you haven't seen it, but hopefully you've seen Night Flyer. Towards the third act, right at the end, like last 10, 15 minutes, it goes black and white and turns like demons or like some Fulci style craziness where you get a little glimpse of hell and you're like, whoa, we're in the beyond? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do
there... It's pretty amazing.
Throughout the picture, he's taking photographs.
Yeah.
And they're black and white pictures. So I wanted to visually say he's stepping into his photographs.
Right.
And this is how brave, and I respect that. Looking at this now, so I went to Richard Rubinstein. I said, "Hey, Richard, I have this crazy idea." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, like when the vampire feeds him his blood and he starts freaking out and he starts seeing the bodies rise. He's like, "Yeah." I said, "I want to shoot that in black and white." And he's like, "Why?" And I said, "Because it's like, he's stepping into his photographs, his own personal hell."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay." Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, you'd get quite a fight nowadays.
I'd get a fight today. But he's like, Rubinstein was just, and still is, this an amazing supporter of artists.
And it's funny, Elric's like, this would make a good double bill now with Nightcrawler, the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal. Have you seen it yet?
Of course I've seen it.
It's a perfect,
I love it.
What a great double bill right there.
Oh my God, that is a good
Flyer and Nightcrawler. I think that would work great.
I'd pay to see that. We can make that. We probably can make that happen.
Yeah,
Tarantino.
We should. Yeah.
New Beverly.
New Beverly screening. Let's do it.
I wonder if. Do you think?
Are there prints of Night Flyer out there? Do you have a print?
I do have a print.
Really?
I think my dad has it. Dad, do you have my print?
I think we'll find out if you have a print.
And Rubinstein has prints too.
Okay. All right. So they are out there.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Because Richard's, he has prints of all of his films. Isn't it nice?
Yeah.
And he has them in those vaults in New York.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're in Pennsylvania or something. Anyway, so we. You were asking about the effect of Night Flyer.
The effect of it, yeah, it comes out.
So it comes out. It does well.
For you?
It does well, and I get a movie right away. So this is the story. Now begins.
Oh, here we go. There's a lot I have to ask you
everybody.
about from here, this period. So
everybody get a drink.
97? Okay, and your next movie came out.
I need another glass of wine.
He's pouring a glass of wine. Okay. We're going to need to refill.
Do you want
here.
another glass of wine?
Yeah, of course, because again, we're going from how long of a period is this? 97 to what? To 2006? Holy shit, Mark. I'm sorry. We need to drink because it was almost 19 years before.
Okay, hold on.
Is that right? Yeah. Is my math correct? Or all right.
Are those the eyes I'm giving you?
What was happening? What happened?
Okay, so everybody.
What happened right after?
This is what right after and what's happening. This is what I get asked all the time.
Right.
And I actually want to tell this story. It's an important story to tell. Mm-hmm. I knew everything. At least I thought I knew everything about Hollywood after Night Flyer. Mm-hmm. I knew how to make a movie. I had the ability to make a movie. The desire and the passion. And I thought I was ready. And there's something I did not know about Hollywood. And we're going to get to that in a moment.
Okay.
And that's what happened. And I'm really excited to tell this story because it's a good tale for filmmakers, young and old. And they need to know it. So, isn't that good?
Yeah,
that's very
we're ready. Here we go.
You're riveted.
And we'll be right back. No, I'm just kidding. No breaks. Go ahead.
So before we get there, here the woe is me stuff. Okay, so right after
this is the woe is me hour now.
Yeah, here we go. No, it's actually pretty cool, and we'll get to that. I'm happy I went through this stuff. Uh-huh. And you're going to ask me why later.
Of course.
But I'm actually very happy these things happened to me. So, right after Night Flyer, I got my next picture right away. Mm-hmm. It was a movie called Slice, and it was going to be produced by Canal Plus out of France, and we were shooting in Toronto. Mm-hmm. Now it was going to star Michael Berryman, Tony Todd, the late great Jason Miller. It would have ended up being his last, Father Karras from The Exorcist. Yeah. It would have ended up being his last film. Tom Savini was doing the practical effects on it. Doesn't it sound like the best movie of all time?
Yeah.
So Slice was Lazarus Slice, an axe murderer who lives in the walls of an old creepy house. I mean, it was good stuff. So we set the movie up at Canal Plus, and we went to Toronto, and I prepped that movie for 3 months. Mm-hmm. The effects with Tom, we cast the film, locations were set. I was 2 weeks out from shooting the picture, and the funding was pulled. Now, this had nothing to my producer was sued, Pierre, the great Pierre Calfon from France. Mm-hmm. He was sued by an ex-business partner, and it had nothing to do with Slice at all. But he just wanted to mess with Pierre and mess his life up. So he named Slice in the lawsuit, and the bank-sniffing litigation pulled the funding.
Wow.
And it was just devastating. We tried for about a month or two to try to get the film back up, and we couldn't get it back up. So Slice fell apart. That's fine. It happens. Like, you hear these stories happening all the time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You've heard these kind of stories before.
Sure. I mean, it's very common for things to fall apart.
Yeah, you don't really know this until it happens to you, but it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting 2 weeks before you're about to shoot and getting everything prepped.
Yeah. Julie Entwistle, who played Catherine Blair, was also going to be in Slice.
Okay. And
it fell apart. Mm-hmm. Okay, so soon after, I had a 2-picture deal at Warner Brothers, with Maysville Productions, which was George Clooney's production company at the time. It was for Slice, once again, and for a comic book I had the rights to called DEADWORLD.
DEADWORLD, yeah.
King Zombie. So basically, DEADWORLD was, Road Warrior meets Dawn of the Dead. It's like zombies on motorcycles. It was badass. Yeah. And I bought the rights with the money I made on Night Flyer from the comic book publisher, Gary Reed. And they loved it. You know what I mean? So Warner Brothers loved it. Maysville Productions loved it. And we hired Todd Alcott, I believe, who wrote Ants for Spielberg at the time. Remember the animated film?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so he was right.
The writer of Ants.
The writer of Ants writing DEADWORLD. So he began writing the script, and I was working with him. Uh-huh. And then a regime change happened at Warner Brothers. Now, a different, a whole different executive branch came in. Mm-hmm. And what happens, people out there, and when regime changes happen, they come in with their own agenda. They don't want the old movies they're not really interested in, especially stuff in development.
Right.
If they're shooting, maybe they'll see those through.
Yeah. But if it's something, whoever the new guard is, they will want to kill whoever their predecessors' projects were.
They flush the toilet, and
they don't want anything to do with that stuff.
And why would you? I guess I don't. I mean,
It's a weird power play sort of thing.
It is. It's not like they evaluate each picture necessarily. They just kill them.
No. I mean, I did an article on this with Tom Holland talking about Fright Night.
Yeah.
Because Fright Night 2, they were supposed to make, not the version that came out, but they were supposed to make one immediately after the original. And that was a victim of a studio change.
Same thing.
Somebody's like, no, I don't want to do this project.
Right.
You know, it just happens all the time.
It happens all the time. So there's a clause in your contracts, you guys, just to let you know that there's a clause like this where they can pay you, the studio can pay you a certain amount of money to go away. And they paid us a certain amount of money to go away.
So does that mean that your 2-picture deal has been
bought out?
Met.
Yeah, they bought me out.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. So now you're...
Is it decent pay to get bought out at least?
No amount of money is enough.
Worth... Yeah, no, it's not.
Because I just want to make the pictures. So, and around this time, I was working. So that happened, and that was a bummer. And around the same time, I was working with Clive Barker.
Yeah,
I did the first treatment for Midnight Meat Train.
Wow, I forgot all about that.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, and so Clive was really great. You know, and he really dug Night Flyer, and he saw how I was faithful to King, and I made it feel like King, and he's like, make it feel like me.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, man. So I wrote this thing, and I went there. You know, it was just really dark and sexual and bizarre. And so at the time, he was going through, I think he was writing his children books.
Right. The Abarat stuff.
The Abarat stuff. And he was making, it was a big deal in town, and he was making big deals around town. And I come back with this treatment for this really dark, crazy, you know, it would have been a great double bill with the original Hellraiser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we couldn't do it because he read it, and he's so great, and he's so sweet, but he was like, Mark, it's just too dark. Clive Barker,
Clive,
telling me it's too dark. But he was very sweet about it. And,
wow.
So that didn't happen. Now, okay. So
but you got to work with King and Barker.
I did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they really liked the work, and that actually was great. Okay, so now you're 2, 3, 4 years because of these circumstances away from the release of Night Flyer.
Right.
In Hollywood, you have to work every year and a half.
Yeah.
Now, this is the part I didn't know. This is what I was talking about earlier. You have to keep on working.
Visibly
working.
Because you were working.
I was working.
You had 3 movies essentially back to back that didn't come to fruition.
Right, for various reasons.
Right. Out of your control.
Suddenly there's a hole in your filmography. Now there's a hole of 3, 4 years. And people start going, what's wrong with Pavia? You know what I mean? Like, why hasn't he been working? Well, this happened. I had, reasons, but they don't want to hear it. And that's cool. I get it. You know what I mean? So I was just like, well, just keep on going, keep on fighting. And I had some other projects. So now you're into the early 2000s. Now you're kind of.
Well, I was going to ask you about one.
Which one?
I don't. You know what? I'm glad you have a full glass of wine there. So you were going to do a little movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Rumor has it.
Yeah.
Before it went to somebody else.
Yes.
That did it for Platinum Dunes. But because you were was it true that Platinum Dunes was interested in Slice?
No.
What was the connection to them? Because I know there was a connection.
So how did Texas Chainsaw?
Yeah, the whole Texas
happen?
Chainsaw. Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually exactly where we are in the story.
Yeah.
So this
perfect.
Is we're going in order.
Let me take a sip of my wine.
Is this a good story? Is this a good story?
Yep.
You're not bored, are you?
Nope. Let's keep
going.
going.
Cliffhanger. Okay, great.
Chainsaw.
So Texas Chainsaw. Okay. So Michael Bay had formed a new company and called Platinum Dunes. And they were going to remake Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep.
And Brad Fuller, producer, Andrew Foreman, they the line producers.
Yep.
And they were looking for writers. And they were interviewing writers all around town. And they didn't hear any of the takes that they liked. And my agent at the time at William Morris, Graham Kay, said, I'm going to call Platinum Dudes, and they need to meet you.
Yeah.
So he calls him up and says, you got to meet Pavia. You're going to love this guy. You know what I mean? He loves these movies. He's passionate, and you're just going to dig him. And he's a director too. And they love producers tend to love writer-directors.
Right.
It's a lot easier.
Well, it's one less job to hire. It's like, we got 2 for 1 here.
But it's like you don't have to get the okay with the writer because he's right here.
He's writing it, yeah.
So the writer-director is right. It's a nice situation. So
right.
They had interviewed literally dozens and dozens. I heard the rumor of up to 60 different people.
Yeah.
And they didn't hear a take they liked. So this was a Monday, and they said, sure, we'll see Mark. And this was on a Friday. So I was like, oh my God, I have a chance to go in and pitch Texas Chainsaw, how I would do it. So I wrote a complete treatment, A to Z, in 4 days. And I went in and I met with Brad and Andrew, and they were great guys. And I just told them the story of what I wanted to do. And at the end of it, it was like 45 minutes. They were like looking at me very excited, and they're like, "You're our guy." Yes. Yes. You know, they were all excited and we were high-fiving, and they loved the take and my enthusiasm for it. And at the time I was moving cross country. I was moving from Chicagoland to Los Angeles. And they were like, let's do it, you know, go move. And by the time you're here, we're going to be ready. The contracts will be ready and we'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
And then what happened, unfortunately, is, and this happens in Hollywood, and it's the way it is Michael Bay was getting pressure from his agency to hire within. You know what I mean? To hire the director within the agency. And that's the way it works in Hollywood. And I was actually with William Morris at the time, and they were at a different agency. And they were getting pressure to hire from
somebody,
within, within the family, the agency family.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got to Los Angeles, you know, it had fallen apart.
Wow.
So, but they were really great about it and gracious about it, you know, Brad and Andrew and everybody. And I was disappointed, but I wasn't upset. You know what I mean? Because I understood. This is the way Hollywood works, and you have to understand that.
Right.
It wasn't personal. No, we really liked each other, and they were great to me, even to the point of my next script that I wrote. They wanted to make that one as well, which is called Sick Nick, which was a Christmas horror picture.
Right.
I let them read it first, and they wanted. And Brad was very excited by that script and took it to New Line, but New Line killed that one because they were like, we don't want to do 2 killer movies in a row. Like they had done Texas Chainsaw, they didn't want to do Sick Nick, which is another
slasher movie,
guy with a knife movie, yeah.
And a Christmas one. Which it's funny because the original Silent Night was like such a controversial thing.
Yeah.
And
well, that's why I wrote Sick Nick, because no one had made a
Killer
Christmas
Santa in a while. Yeah.
In 20 years, 25 years, and now there's been a few, but Sick Nick was the first. You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he was in love with it, and he was a great supporter, and he still is, and you know, he's a great guy, and you know. But anyway, so that's what happened with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow.
I came very close.
You did?
Yeah, and on Dawn of the Dead as well, and you know that.
Oh, God, I didn't know about the Dawn of the Dead
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I was close on time. I was Rubenstein's choice.
Oh, right. Because obviously he had a stake in that.
He
from
did.
The original.
So it came down to, he always wanted to make another picture with me, and he had this great opportunity to make it, a remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I was his choice as director, and they brought me in. So it came down to me and Zack Snyder.
Wow. The guy that directed that Morrissey video? I guess.
And it was really weird because at that time I had done a feature and Zack at that time had not.
Again,
Right.
he'd done music videos.
And commercials. But he was
so
award-winning. He won a lot of awards and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's tough because I know you're a horror fan. So I mean, is it because I look at like, you know, I'm not a big fan of Zack Snyder's recent work, but I look at what he did with Dawn, and I love it.
Yeah, Dawn's great.
And you know what? Like, I remember seeing the teaser trailer for the Texas Chainsaw remake at a Fangoria convention, and everyone booed. That was going to be a tough one to win people over. And by the time it came out, it's kind of like, that's not that bad. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I actually thought
so
they did a pretty good job on it.
It's interesting to see kind of these movies come to fruition and be like, all right, that's a take. I don't know if it's the take I would have done, but it's an interesting take. Now, in this time period, though, you still kept in touch with King, and,
I did.
You guys wrote a Night Flyer too together.
We did.
Okay.
So
where did that fit in the timetable?
You're doing really well, Rob. Because
thank you.
we're in order here.
It's like I did research and know how to do my job.
Yeah, it's like we're in order.
Even slightly drunk, I know what I'm doing.
I have there's another bottle.
Oh, God. All right.
Okay,
well,
so
let's get to Night Flyer 2 and see what happens.
So anyway.
How early did you even think? I mean, because King is also not the type to sequelize his
Not at
material.
all. Right.
So
He's
the
not
fact that
into it at all.
he was enthusiastic about doing this with you, though. What was different about this for him?
Okay, so we were at about this time period after Dawn, and then Richard came to me and said, I want to do a Night Flyer, I want a sequel to Night Flyer. I said, terrific, let's do it. So he hired me, just me, to write it, and I wrote the first draft on my own. And of course, Steven had approval on everything, as far as FLIER. So Richard sent him the script, and he read it. He goes, "This is really good." He's like, "Would Mark mind if I kind of started working with him on it?"
You're the king. Do whatever you have to do.
I'm like, "Steve." And so we went back and forth, and we wrote Night Flyer 2, Fear of Flying, together. And it was the first time, I believe, he had co-written a script with somebody.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it turned out it was a really cool script.
Was it prequel, sequel?
Sequel.
Or is total sequel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sequel. And it kind of focused on Catherine Blair's character. It
Well,
kind of
when I say prequel, what I mean by that is, would we have learned more about the Night Flyer?
Yes.
The
you learned
backstory,
you
so
did.
to speak. Okay.
It was great. It's still great.
Okay.
Because it still exists. Wait, what? So
I think we're due for a Night Flyer revival. All right.
Yeah.
You listen in Scream Factory just about your last movie, because then we need to finance Night Flyer 2. That's just me. If I had all the money in the world, that's what I would do right now.
So, well, you can produce it.
Great. All right, let me sell some vinyl here, and we'll get this thing going.
So Steve and I wrote Night Flyer 2, Fear of Flying together, and it turned out great, and Richard was very happy with it. And we started taking it around. Now, so this would have been mid-2000s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2005, 2006, right?
Yeah,
Around then.
and it was out on DVD at that point.
It was.
I think. Yeah.
It was available.
So, okay.
So it's funny, because today, that movie would have been made like this. That movie would have been picked up instantly because of all the venues, Netflix and Hulu, and everybody's needs content now. Okay,
Yeah.
But that didn't exist in 2005, 2006.
Right.
So
right.
we shopped it to all the major studios, and they were being hesitant about making a sequel to a cult film.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What about Evil Dead 2? I mean, come on!" And they're like, "Evil Dead what?" They didn't know.
Yeah.
So we were having a hard time getting the budget that was necessary for that movie. And I think it was $10 million at the time. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And we couldn't set it up. I mean, Richard couldn't get it set up. Because it was infuriating because we all loved it. King loved it.
Even with King's name.
Stephen King. Night Flyer 2, Fear of Flying, screenplay by Mark Pavia and Stephen King.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get it.
Wow.
So Richard still has the script. It still exists. But today it would have been a piece of cake.
Right.
I mean,
it could still be.
It still could. Well, you never say never.
Well, you know what? What's Richard up to these days? Because I haven't heard about him in a long time.
Yeah.
The last thing I heard was I thought there was a rumor that he was preparing a 3D version of the original Dawn of the Dead, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard much from him producing-wise. Is he still kind of in the business? And
No,
keeping
he
active?
is. Yeah, absolutely
Okay.
he is. He's always just been very selective, because he can be.
Yeah, at
You
this
know what I
point,
mean?
sure.
Yeah, at this point he can be, and he's just been, I got an email from him last night, congratulating me on Fender Bender, and he's a great guy, and he's still out there swinging the bat. But he chooses what to do and when to do it, because he has the luxury to do that, because he's had so many successes over his career.
Yeah.
So he's still doing his thing.
Good.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is
good for
amazing.
him. He's a great guy.
Now, Fender Bender, I don't mean to cut ahead, but in between those years, you worked and developed several films. And,
I
of
did.
course, these are screenplays. You're a big horror fan, so you had things like Slice and Sick Nick and kind of things in the slasher vein.
So getting back to this story what I didn't know. So now after Night Flyer 2, and now there's an 8-year, 9-year hole in my filmography. Now it's a problem. Now it's a serious problem because this is what I did not know. Like like I said earlier, if you're not working every year, something's wrong with you.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with you.
No, but on paper, somebody goes to your IMDb and they're like, is he difficult?
Is he
Or
difficult?
What is it?
And I'm not going to and they're going to have a hard time. And I get it. And I understand it. It's like you're going to have a hard time, an executive or a producer selling me to the studio.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, and I was having meetings around town, and everybody enjoyed the meeting, and they loved me and my enthusiasm and my ideas. And it was not about that. It was about this hole.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're cold.
Yeah.
You're cold. You were hot, talented, but now you're cold.
So is that like, it's funny, would you consider that kind of like a weird ageism in terms of directors?
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm friendly with a lot of the quote-unquote masters of horror guys.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe how much trouble
I
those guys
would believe it.
have
Yeah, of
getting
course.
a film off the ground. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time, it's the same thing. It's like, well, if it's so-and-so directing, and they'll name one of these younger guys that just,
We had a hit last week.
We would greenlight that right away. And it's
Yeah.
like, but you don't want to let, like, Stuart Gordon direct another movie. Like, it's
And
Stuart
Joe
Gordon.
Dante.
He said Joe
Tom
Dante.
Holland.
They're all great guys.
Yeah.
So it's weird at that gap. It becomes ageism, not just... it's like when you haven't done something in a while.
Yeah.
Now, in that time period, did you consider TV at all? Because obviously, maybe back in
Yeah.
the late 90s, 2000s, there's a little bit of a stigma of being a TV director,
Sure.
doing that stuff. But in the last decade, TV has just grown so dramatically
Yeah, I
and
consider
gotten really good.
Yeah, and I considered everything, and I was working. Okay, so to get back to the story, so I had I had to get a day job, because the money ran out, and I was working in the industry. I was just working in post production around town.
Okay.
And I had a lot of support from a lot of people in this town because I had met everybody.
Yeah.
I met everybody. And I had some very successful friends, and King was still very supportive, and everybody they were rooting for me. And I realized I had to fight my way back.
Yeah.
And I knew it was probably going to be through my writing and an idea, and I just wasn't going to give up because this is what I was meant to do, and no one, damn it, was going to tell me I couldn't do it, and I was just going to do it. So I
Right.
just put my head down and worked every day to make it happen. And I mean every day.
Right.
7 days a week.
And how do you maintain like a positive, like being positive about this whole thing? Because
Yeah.
for a lot of people listening, I'm sure all those opportunities, getting that close to like Texas Chainsaw, and then losing it, you can understand getting bitter or angry about it. But then again, that negative energy doesn't do anybody any good. And that's the thing. It's like it's not like you're going to make one movie that's successful and that's going to, it's a fight every time.
Every
I mean, Orson Welles at the
Yeah,
end of his
yeah.
life, and this is the guy that made Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
He had, people didn't want to finance his movies at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like you have to put your dukes up every time.
Persevere. And I guess this is because I had a lot of support from people I admired and loved.
Yeah.
Friends and family. But most of all, within myself, I knew what I was capable of, and I just believed in it, and I knew what I could deliver if given the opportunity.
Right.
And I just knew it would happen. I never doubted it for a minute. I didn't know how
Or when.
or when, but I knew it would happen.
Yeah.
Again. And I was like, you know what? No one's going to tell me I can't do it, damn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just, even to the point where I was working, day gigs in post, and I got rid of my car, and I started taking public transportation back and forth from work. Not that I couldn't afford a car. I could clearly afford a car. I did it on purpose to have extra time to write my scripts. So taking the subway or taking a bus to work gave me, back and forth, gave me an extra 2 to 3 hours of time to work on my screenplays.
Right.
So that when you're driving, as you know, in Los Angeles, you're in constant traffic, and you're furious and you're cursing, and you have to concentrate.
Yeah.
By taking public transportation, I didn't have to worry about anything. So I'd put on my soundtrack music, I'd have my notebook, and I wrote my last 2 scripts. I wrote Fender Bender on public transportation in
That's
Los Angeles.
amazing.
And I wrote that Stephen King anthology film, Reaper's Image, on public transportation in Los Angeles.
We'll have to talk about that in a
Yeah,
second.
we'll get that in a second. But
Well, I mean, it's funny because I think that's the challenge for a lot of us, myself included, that you're finding the time for those personal projects because you're trying to pay the bills and
Yeah.
do the regular day job, and
Yeah.
then by the end of the day, you're just so exhausted.
Yes.
But you have to make the time, and I think that's
Yeah.
amazing. Public transport,
Yeah, I just
is
came-
forcing you to write.
Well, I did it because I was happy to do it, and
Yeah.
I took out, and all the stress from driving in Los Angeles was gone, and suddenly I just put my sound, because I love soundtracks like you do.
Yeah.
I listen to soundtracks constantly, all day, every day, because right, I love.
It's
soundtracks.
great. It's great.
So
Good music.
when I'm writing a script, I choose 5, 6 soundtracks to listen to,
Yeah.
which are the soundtracks of the script, and then I write to it. And I just, by doing this, I found the extra hours, and I would do it longhand because I kind of want to be intimate with it.
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? And then I would go home at night and type it into the computer.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how I did it. And I knew eventually it would be with the written word, with the script, and it was with Fender Bender.
Now, was that so? So obviously, throughout the years, you had several ideas and scripts that you were working on, but
Dozens.
when Scream Factory decided we want to make an original movie,
Right.
And you knew somebody
Yes.
within Shout Factory was a fan of Night Flyer or a friend of yours,
A friend of mine.
and they suggested you.
Yes. Well,
Was Fender Bender your first pick to show Scream Factory? Like, oh, this is the perfect film, I think, because now you have a pick. That's the only advantage of having all this time is you have several
I
scripts.
can't
and you're
even
like,
tell
okay.
you, my chest is full. And the great thing now is that the chest is open.
Yeah,
we'll
now
get to
you
that
can,
in a second.
you can be like, all right, now I got a bunch of stuff.
Oh, we'll get to that.
So how did
This
how
story
did
has
Fender Bender?
This story has a happy ending.
Yes.
So it's like
If
everybody
you're
out there.
still with us,
Wait, is it boring? Is it,
no,
is it too
you're
long?
still with us and drinking and depressed. No,
I know.
it's going to be happy.
No, keep fighting. Keep fighting. It's about perseverance. But anyways, so Fender Bender. So, okay, let's talk about Fender Bender. Is it right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
So everybody's like, how did you come up with the idea? And I was out one day traveling in L.A. with a buddy of mine, Tony Silva, and a buddy I was working with at my day job. And we were driving home, and we got into a Fender Bender. And he got out to do due diligence, and he did his stuff, and he came back 10 minutes later, and off we went. And I looked over at him, and I was like, what happened back there? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, so what'd you do? He's like, you do what you do at a Fender Bender. Which is what? Exchange information. I'm like, what'd you tell him? And he's like, name, number, phone number, address, everything you do at a Fender Bender.
Uh-huh.
And I just kind of looked at him, and I was like, well, what if you did it on purpose? And he's like, what if you did what on purpose? I'm like, what if you hit us on purpose to get your information, and he's coming to kill you tonight? He's like, shut up, you're freaking me out. And I knew it. Rob,
was
I knew
it.
it. I knew it. And it was a light. It was not even a light bulb. It was a lightning bolt into my head. I was like, oh shit, that is the greatest idea for a horror movie I've ever had. And I ran home and I started writing right away. And I wrote that script faster than I've ever written anything in my life. I wrote that script, and I was working full time, and I wrote that script in 3 months.
Wow.
So that's how I wrote the script. And at the same time, a good buddy of mine who I had worked with in post around town, his name is Nick Eckham, and he had gotten a job at Shout Factory. And they had decided they were going to start making movies.
Yes.
Because they're the best in the world at what they do.
And they are.
They are. And I was a fan of them like you are.
Yes.
I have dozens of their discs.
You've seen the wall.
yes,
There's a lot of Scream Factory on that movie wall.
And they decided, rightly so, they're like, why don't we just start owning our stuff? Why don't we start making movies? Okay. So they hadn't found, we're going to do this, they said. And let's do a horror picture. But they, as you know, reading script after script, and they didn't find anything they were really excited about.
Yeah.
Then Nick started working there, and he's like, oh, a good buddy of mine did Night Flyer. And of course, they knew Night Flyer because
they're
know
fans there, yeah.
They're fans, and they knew Classic, and Jeff, and Cliff, and, like they knew that movie, and Jordan Field. And we'll get to them, everybody in a second.
Uh-huh.
But they're like, oh, yeah, Mark, what's he up to? And then Nick was like, he's a buddy of mine. You should meet him. So we had a meeting. And they asked about some other projects because I had a few scripts, like you said, at that point. And the budget seemed a little too out of range, a little too big.
For the other ones.
Yeah, maybe more like what a studio would be cool with, but, like a Universal Pictures or something. But,
Right.
And I was like, you know what? And they're like, what? I said, I just wrote this thing. And it seems to be perfect for the budget you're looking to do it. And it's called Fender Bender. And I told them that little pitch.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, my God, that sounds amazing. Send it to us. And I sent it. They loved it. And that was it.
Wow.
That was it. It happened literally like that quickly. And here's a reality of Hollywood filmmakers out there. And I said, this happened quickly. You know what I mean? But where are we today, Rob? What's the date? Well, we don't do the exact date, but we're in 2016.
Yes.
Right? So in this, late spring, almost summer of 2016, right? Mm-hmm. I wrote the first draft of Fender Bender was 2013. Mm-hmm. So, and that movie happened fast. So there's a reality. 3
By
years.
fast, you mean 3 years fast.
Hollywood fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, like we were working very, when I say we, my amazing manager, Nadia Redler, we were out there. She was working hard for me and believed in me, and we were pushing. And and I just, as a side note, you need people like that in your life too.
Yeah,
who
of
believe
course.
in you and work and push. And I was fortunate enough to have these people who they saw what I was doing, they believed in it, and they were willing to work hard to make it happen because they believed it would happen.
Yeah.
And that meant everything to me.
What was it like stepping on to a set of a movie after having such a long break on it? I mean, did it all come back? Because, what was fun was we did a Q&A at the LA screening of it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, your cast was saying that you were just a fiery ball of energy, which I already know. And just that your enthusiasm just kept the energy level up. And that's kind of what you want from a filmmaker is it's not just a job. It's like this means something to you, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, what Fender Bender represented was more than just a 90-minute 80s slasher throwback movie that people, when they see the picture, which is a lot of fun, and that's what they see, but it meant more. It's more than that.
Yeah,
it's redemption. To me, you know what I mean. It was 19 years of hard work. This is get real.
And here's the irony: I know for a fact that because of it, you are in meetings again with people because that's the way things work
it's
here.
Crazy.
You have a big movie that just debuted on cable.
How do you know that? Oh, you've heard stuff.
I may have some insider knowledge. This is all I got to say. But also, what's funny? And I saw the movie with you. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be candid. I didn't love it. I liked it a lot.
Thanks, Rob.
But as he grabs the bottle to hit me with that, no. But the best compliment I can give it, and I do think this is a great compliment. I love that the way it's being presented to the world is on Chiller.
Yeah.
Because it is obviously such a love letter to the 80s slasher movies that people of my age discovered on cable that it feels like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're just flipping through the channels on Chiller and just happen to catch this, I feel like it's that movie.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what's this?
Yeah.
This is some slasher movie?
Fender Bender,
I've never seen this one before.
Yeah.
I'm going to tape it or whatever. It just seems like it was made for... It reminds me of discovering that 80s
late
slasher
night,
movie.
Late night, HBO.
Exactly. It's got that vibe to it, which
it
I
was
really
weird
dig.
because getting back to Shout Factory, so I met with Jordan Fields and Gus Krieger over there, amazing producers, and they just loved the idea. They loved the screenplay, and I went in there and it was weird. I did it again. I pitched how I would make this movie. I was flashing back. I really did. It was the exact same thing. I flashed back to when I was pitching Night Flyer to Stephen King and Richard Rubinstein. I was in a conference room again, playing soundtrack music again. It was weird. I did it again.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, man. At the end, everybody was high-fiving again. And it just happened.
Yeah.
And they put me in touch with some amazing, line producers, Echo Wolf Productions, which is Carl Lucas and Josh Bunting, out of New Mexico.
Right, and that's where you shot.
That's where we shot the picture,
yeah.
And who loved the project, and we all dug each other. Carl's a huge horror fan too, so he had loved Night Flyer, so it was kind of fun for him. And he always wanted to make a movie like this, a mass killer movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I came up with the idea that I told you about, and suddenly, so this guy shows up, and not the only, it's creepy enough that he shows up to kill you, but he is so into it, he has an outfit.
A persona, yeah. He becomes a killer.
He becomes he's actually a human extension of his
car. Yeah.
So he is his car. And when that happened, it happened in my mind, this perfect fusion of slasher films that I loved from the 80s.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan of. An opportunity to make a love letter, or I say my bloody Valentine to the slasher genre.
I see what you did there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm here every Thursday. Thank you very much. So, it was a great fun, and because it also, the way I shot the picture, there's not one handheld shot in the movie.
Yeah.
It's all very controlled. We shot widescreen. It's all dolly and cranes, and we didn't have a lot of time to shoot the picture. You know what I mean? So it was a challenge, to make that happen, because usually this run and gun approach to filmmaking is kind of based on schedule and budget. And we had that small schedule and limited budget, but I demanded that we do it this way.
Right. Did you ever think of or maybe it was just because the idea it came together so fast. But because it is a love letter to that style of movies, did you ever think of setting it in the 80s, or did it feel like it was important to be modern day because of the usage of texting and stuff like that?
Exactly, because it was. I thought it was more interesting, to kind of make it timeless.
Yeah.
And when you watch it, even to the costumes, this was a very conscious decision. Even the costumes are nothing is set today. It was very timeless in its presentation, even the props around the sets. Nothing, except for the texting, except for the FaceTiming, where we kind of had to do it out of necessity for story.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it like you're watching part of the movie going, when is this set?
Right.
And I think when you watch Fender Bender, you might, even down to the score, which is a synth score, kind of a throwback to
And again, that's perfect for cable because most of those movies, I'm like, when is this? Well, whatever.
Yeah, it was really
fun.
fun.
Horror movie on cable.
It was a lot of fun to do that. Actually, kind of mess with people, a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was all by design. But no, I didn't want to make it in the 80s. I just wanted to reference the 80s.
Right. And do you keep up? I mean, as a horror fan, do you still keep up with what's relevant, what's going on now, and what fans are talking about?
Yeah.
What are some of the? I mean, is anything recently that's impressed you, or do you what kind of stands out to you?
You know what's funny is the great irony of all of it is like you've probably heard this a lot when you're making movies, you don't have a lot of time to see movies.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've heard that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, you're so focused on this one job.
Yeah, we just finished. Okay, what's today? We're not going to give the exact date, but it's June.
We're in June.
We're in June. We're in June.
Yes.
But I just finished Fender Bender in late April.
Wow.
I mean, is that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and
just
you shot
finished.
it about a year ago?
No.
Roughly?
We shot in October, November of last year.
Oh, okay.
Of 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been locked up. I mean, between, shooting, and then you go straight into post, and then you go straight into editing, and, mixing, the score. I mean, it's all encompassing, and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And you don't see
Last thing you want to do is watch another person's movie.
Well, and it's kind of weird. I just try. Okay, so like when you're making a picture, at least this is me, when you're writing a movie, when you're directing a picture, I don't try to see a lot of movies as I'm doing it because I don't want it to influence me.
What you're doing, yeah.
Or I just don't want to. I just want to stay focused. So what I do is I just watch the stuff that that inspires me.
Right.
So I would be watching, all the Halloween,
the Carpenter stuff,
stuff, and I watch Duel, Spielberg's Duel.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I would just jive off that stuff every night, and just kind of get into my zone,
right,
and just kind of disappear and make it.
And how is Fender Bender? I mean, it already premiered on Chiller. It's going to be premiering several more times. It's going to be airing several more times on Chiller after you hear this. So definitely DVDR it. And it's safe to say that Scream Factory will be putting it out eventually.
Yeah.
If I was a betting man, I'd say closer to fall.
Yeah.
We could be coy about it, but sure, later in the year. But what the reaction seems to be pretty, for the most part, from the horror audience, has been pretty positive.
It is.
So, what is it? What has it done for you now as of the last week since
It's been amazing.
You're happy. It's been a long journey to get back here.
I can't even express it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just about.
That's why it was important for me to have you on the show again, because I know the journey that you've been on this whole time.
I hope the story we told I hope it's come across about the journey back to this moment, because it's all about perseverance. It's about passion and not forgetting it, no matter how long it takes. No matter what people tell you, and there's haters out in that world, and you'll never make a movie that everybody loves. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It is absolutely impossible. So you have to make the movie you love and never give up. Never, ever give up. And if you take anything from my story, it is like just keep fighting. Because so many people, and you have friends just like who have stories similar to mine, but they would have stopped it in 2005.
Right.
And gone back to the Midwest and got a job with my dad at the butcher store.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
that's
not.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
But also, the thing is, it's easy. It's I tell people, I have a lot of young writers that want to get into writing about movies.
Yeah.
They love this stuff too, and they want to write about it. And I tell them all the same thing. I was like, forget all this peripheral bullshit.
Yeah.
It's about the work.
Yeah.
Just if you're proud and happy with what you put out there, it's all that matters. It doesn't matter what else is going on out there.
And it's about a lot of sacrifice, personal time, personal relationships. It's just about focus, passion and a belief that you will do it. Nobody's going to tell me I can't do what I was put on this planet to do.
Right.
And I mean that with every fiber of my heart. And you know, Rob knows, like, I mean it. And that every no made me stronger.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, tell me no again. You know what I mean? Not bitter. I'm not, and you know me, I'm not a bitter person. I understand this town and I respect this town. Mm-hmm. But I was going to do it by my own rules. Like,
Right.
I mean, I was going to have to do it, come back again. You know what I mean? I didn't want help. You know what I mean? Even though people were helping me, Steven helped me, King was supportive. There were some other friends who were very supportive, but I knew I had to do it on my own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
You always
absolutely.
have to do it on your own.
Yeah. And again, it's like if you have a passion for something, nothing is going to stop
Nothing
you
was
from
going to
doing
stop
it.
me. Nothing. And
Nothing.
it was like, and I got to tell you, and I mean this, and Nadia, if she was here, would back this up. When I came up with Fender Bender, I said, this is it. And she's like, what? Because we had other projects out at the time, bigger projects. I mean, bigger, higher profile projects.
Right.
I'm like, it's Fender Bender. I know this to be true.
This is the one that's going to
This is the one that's it's gonna get me back in the game, and people are gonna dig it, and it's all gonna start again.
Right.
And that seems to be happening.
Yeah.
And it's weird, it just, the production was smooth. It was fun. Oh, you asked me how it was on set. It was a homecoming, man. I was just, on day one, boom, I was just like, okay, first shot, let's go. And it was just, I was ready to do it. I loved my cast, Mackenzie Bekah, incredible.
She's great.
Incredible. Bill Sage, wow.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And they were behind me. I had producers, Carl and Josh and Jordan and Gus and just everybody, and Jeff and Cliff, and just everybody behind me, rooting for me. And as dailies came in, people were like, oh, shit. They were digging it,
Yeah.
And I was happy. And it was on budget. It was on schedule. And
That's all you do.
it was incredible.
Wow.
And, yeah.
And now what are you thinking of? Because you mentioned anthology before, which I know I heard something about that, or you're not allowed to say.
No, I mean...
Give us a tease. Come
it's,
on.
I mean, it's not a secret because
Right.
it's been in the news. It was like 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
It was when I approached Stephen King,
Uh-huh.
my pal, who's always supportive and helpful and always wants to help when he can, if he can, when he can. And I said, Steve, he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I want to do a Stephen King horror anthology movie, like this generation's Creep Show. Because
Right.
it hasn't been done. A Stephen King horror anthology movie hadn't been done in years. I would, Creep Show 2, what is that, 87?
Maybe Tales from the Dark Side, the movie,
But that
really,
wasn't,
not really?
that was one story.
One story, yeah, exactly.
I'm talking about
all his stories. Yeah,
And
yeah.
horror stories.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, that's cool. You know what I mean? And I said, yeah. And so he goes, I want these 2 stories in them. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, do it. I'm like, okay. So write it.
He's got plenty
Yeah.
at this point.
So he chose 2 stories.
Right.
Everybody knows it's out on, you can find this information, so it's not a secret. And so it was, he chose Mile 81 and N. Mm-hmm. And then I said, and then I chose The Monkey.
Oh.
From Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And then he's like, well, what's the rap going to be? And I said, let me think about it. And then one night I came up with the idea, wouldn't it be cool if the rap was one of his stories too? Like that had never been done in an anthology movie.
Yeah.
So I found a story, Reaper's Image, that I thought would be a cool rap, and it worked beautifully, and he loved it. And so I wrote this script. Okay, I'm not going to get too much. Are we stretching the time here?
No.
Okay.
Go
So
ahead.
I wrote the script. It got pretty big because each of these stories were like Night Flyer. These things were 40 pages each.
Right, and you want to do them right.
And I wanted to do them right. And you know how in Creepshow some of them are, like Father's Day. How long is Father's Day? 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Right?
Right. But
Yeah.
you got 5 stories there. So.
Yeah. And Crate was the biggest one in
Yeah,
Creepshow,
yeah.
and that was like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I had 3 stories that were friggin' 40 minutes. Right. Okay, so this thing was getting massive. I'm like, oh my God. So then we started talking, maybe it's for television.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a mini-series, a 2-night mini. So, yeah, that's cool. So we did that. And then Rand Holston, Steven's amazing agent for, I think 40 years now.
Wow.
They've been a team. Came in and started helping us. And then we started getting interest. So he started shopping it, and there was interest. And then people started saying, well, maybe could it be a TV series,
Yeah.
like Tales from the Dark Side or
Sure.
American Horror Story or whatever. And I was like, sure. Steve he said, sure. It gave his blessing. But what happened ultimately with that, as far as that approach, is that it became too expensive because each week was a new build because it was a new story. You know how in American Horror Stories, one location, right?
Per season.
Per season.
Yeah.
And all these anthology shows are kind of like the same location. This was a new build every time. So it was like a new movie every week.
Pretty much.
And it was too expensive. Yeah. So that kind of happened. But after the success of Fender Bender, people have been asking about it again. Could it be a film? Could it be a feature? You know what I mean? And I always just tell people that the great Rand Holston it's in his court, in his hands. He's representing it. And let's see what happens. It's still there. And there's I'm getting asked from everybody about that project.
Wow.
because of the success. So back to Fender Bender. You asked me